to you I'll tell how the good old Union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
Hello, Tennessee Valley. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Ben Job, because Adam is out of pocket right now.
Yes, indeed.
We are broadcasting live online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio studio in Huntsville, Alabama. Today, the UAW has launched the largest organizing campaign in modern history. We also talked to a South Carolina nurse about the need for safe staffing. We take a look at what bosses and workers were up to in the South last week. All that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show today, we've got a phone number and the line is open. That phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. And if you'd prefer just to send us a text message instead of calling in, you can do that to the same number as well, 844-899-8857, and you can leave us a voicemail throughout the week and a text message throughout the week. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, then you can find us anywhere you find anything online. We are on TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, all at The Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. If you want to become a sustaining donor to the program, or make a one-time donation, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate. You can set up a recurring donation there or a monthly or a single contribution. You can also go to patreon.com/thevalleylaborreport if you are more familiar and prefer that interface. And you can also go to tvlr.fm/store and buy our few remaining Join a Union tees. I think we've got like 15 left, so if you want one, you got to get one. tvlr.fm/store. If you're a member of a union, then please do think about getting your local to sponsor the show. We could not do it without our union sponsors, and we are kicking around some ideas for expansion in the new year, and guess what, folks? That takes money, so give it to us. Reach out for more details.
Tell your folks to give us a Christmas present.
That's right.
Tell your aunties and uncles. And let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their authors and do not necessarily represent the organizations or sponsors of TVLR. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Radio. If you're in the Tennessee Valley, definitely check them out. I love to see internet radio going strong. WVNN, WZZA, WHIV in New Orleans, or through your favorite podcast app. And as most of y'all know, we're not media professionals. We're just pro-union workers out here trying to get the word of the South and the Southern worker out to you guys. So, Jacob, take it away.
There you go, folks. So, appreciate everybody that's already tuning in. We've got about 20-some-odd people watching us on YouTube, and only 5 people have liked the stream. So, those are rookie numbers. Only 20% of y'all that are watching us on YouTube right now have liked the stream. Hit that like button. Subscribe to the show if you haven't so that you can get notified when we drop clips throughout the week. Jared, IFPTE Local 27 President, representing rocket scientists and engineers at NASA here in the chat. Good morning. Appreciate it, Jared. Vonda, president of the Nashville Central Labor Council, says good morning. Appreciate you joining us as always, sister. And don't be shy about letting us know if you've got anything you want to come on the show, talk to us about. You're always welcome. Infinite Content says good morning. Appreciate you joining us as always. And we did get a text message over the week, so I want to respond to that before we go into last week in Southern Labor. And it was just something quick. Hey, fellas, Randy from local 3047 UAW in Elizabethtown, Kentucky here again. Wasn't sure if you were watching the Amazon organizing drive in Northern Kentucky, but here's a TikTok from those efforts. And he sent us a TikTok video. And Randy, what are you doing? You got to watch the show more. We've been updating you about the Amazon organizing drive in Northern Kentucky every single week, and last week in Southern Labor. What are you doing, man? We know about it. What's up? What's going on there? Got to watch the show.
He's just making sure, apparently.
Yeah, just making sure. Okay. Appreciate the always appreciate the tips though. Send
by
us your
and talk about it instead.
That's right. Yeah,
give us the scoop.
That's right.
We need the scoops.
Call in, send us a text message throughout the week. Any tips that you get, and we have added tips to Last Week in Southern Labor in the past. Love to get those, especially from people in organizing campaigns who can give us week to week updates if there are any important milestones, or if management is pulling any shenanigans, or anything that you think other folks ought to know about. tvlr.fm/contact, or send us a text message 844-899-TVLR. Okay, Last Week in Southern Labor is a segment that we do every single week where we take a look at what the workers were up to in the southern United States and the American colonies. Workers are always on the move. We're always unionizing, negotiating contracts, going on strike, pushing for policy and legislation that helps us, and opposing policy and legislation that hurts us. We don't get enough love for that, so we try to do something of a corrective here on the show every week. So here's what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to in the week ending on the 1st of December. In new union campaigns, the UAW is launching the largest organizing campaign in modern history, targeting 150,000 workers nationwide at 13 non-union auto companies for unionization. This is huge news. We're going to spend some more time on that on the other side of the break and dive into it a little bit. Workers likely led or pushed by their employer at Sherwin-Williams in Lawrenceville, Georgia, filed a petition to decertify the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, IUPAT, Local 1961, as the union representing the 37 workers there. 14 workers at Asplund Tree Expert Company in Lexington, Kentucky, filed for a union election with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, Local 369. 34 workers at Casey Trees in Washington, D.C., filed for a union election with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAMAW. 14 workers at Frameworks Institute in Washington, D.C. filed for a union election with IUPAT Local 1937. 7 workers at Top Drilling Company in Yawkey, West Virginia filed for a union election with the Chauffeurs, Teamsters, and Helpers, Local 175. The employer filed for a union election after a majority of the 10 workers at Waxwork Recording Company in Harahan, Louisiana showed support for unionization with the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, Local 270. And if you are getting deja vu about that particular filing, you aren't crazy, because the same number of workers at the same company in the same city filed for a union election with the same union just last week. So I thought that maybe what they had done is withdrawn that petition and then submitted cards to the company showing majority support, forcing the company to file for the election. But last week's filing is still an open case on the NLRB's website. Last week's filing was an RC petition, which is where the employees, the workers, file for a union petition. And this week is an RM petition, which is where the employer files for a union petition after they have been shown that a majority of the workers say they support a union there. So not totally sure what's going on there. Any insight would be welcome. 14 workers at Darling Ingredients in Grapeland, Texas filed for a union election with the Teamsters Local 745. The employer filed for a union election, filed a petition for a union election after a majority of the 55 workers at Evonik Corp. Porcel Industries showed support for unionization with the United Steelworkers International Union. 30 workers at Run for Something in Washington, D.C. filed for an union election with Workers United. And 4 workers at High Point Cannabis in St. Louis, Missouri, filed for a union election with the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW, Local 655. In campaign updates, workers organizing at Amazon's KCVG Air Hub in Kentucky requested coats last week in 38-degree weather that felt like 35 degrees and were denied because, quote, it's not below freezing.
Workers just asking for so much once again.
Insane.
Once again.
Yeah, asking for way too much. And just for the reader and listener out there, hypothermia can set in between 30 and 50 degrees. It doesn't just have to be below freezing. We had several election results last week. The petition that was filed on behalf of an individual worker by the National Right to Work Foundation, boo, to decertify the General Drivers, Warehousemen, and Helpers Local 89, a Teamsters affiliate, as the union representing the 15 employees at IMI Kentucky and Bowling Green, Kentucky, was withdrawn. 12 workers at Delta Helix Energy in Yawkey, West Virginia, withdrew their petition for a unionization with the Chauffeurs, Teamsters, and Helpers, Local 175. 92 workers at International Rescue Committee in Dallas, Texas, voted in favor of unionization, 56-8, with the Office and Professional Employees International Union, OPEIU, Local 277. 58 workers at the Eastern Music Festival in Greensboro, North Carolina, voted 36-4 in favor of unionization with the American Federation of Musicians, Local 342. 34 workers at Rivers Portsmouth Gaming in Portsmouth, Virginia, voted 27-1 in favor of unionization with the Teamsters, Local 822. 40 security guards at FJC Security Services in Nashville, Tennessee, voted 14-2 in favor of unionization with the International Guards Union of America. 101 security guards voted for the International Guard Union of America, IGUA, in a two-way race between them and the Federal Contract Guards of America, FCGA, with the IGUA receiving 33 votes, FCGA receiving 8, and 1 vote for no union at all. Workers at Cooperativa de Ahorro y Crédito Pepiniana, which is in English the Pepiniana Savings and Credit Cooperative, voted 7-1 to decertify the UFCW as the union representing the 9 workers there. 39 workers at American Electric Power Company in Hurricane, West Virginia, voted 28-4 in favor of unionization with the IBEW Local 978. And 42 workers at Republic Services of Georgia in Calhoun, Georgia, voted 22-19 in favor of unionization with the Teamsters Local 728. Several strikes and bargaining updates this week. First off, after unfruitful bargaining sessions with Anheuser-Busch last week, the Teamsters are holding a rally in Jacksonville, Florida, with International President Sean O'Brien. The AFL-CIO Staff Guild has ratified their tentative agreement by 85% after some controversy and contention. The new contract contains a 13.25% raise over 4 years, a cost-neutral pension solution, and more. The Library Administration in Durham, North Carolina, is planning to extend library hours without adding any additional staff or resources. The Union of the Workers there, UE Local 150, claims the library is understaffed already, and this would likely mean workers being forced to work rotations of 7 days in a row with no weekend off. They are asking allies to sign their petition opposing the move. Workers at Sunergo's Coffee, organized as Sunergo's Workers Union in Lexington, Kentucky, with the National Conference of Firemen and Oilers, an SEIU affiliate, went on strike on Black Friday, then voted to extend the strike indefinitely, and last week reached a tentative agreement with the company. The TA will go to membership for a vote next week. Rocky Mount, North Carolina, recently raised police and fire salaries, with their police officers now having the highest starting salaries in the entire state at $60,000 a year. Folks, that's more than I made starting out with a bachelor's degree in mathematics. Sanitation workers for the city, unionized with UE Local 150, even though the state has no collective bargaining for public employees, are calling for wage increases as well, since they were left out of the police and fire salary increases. Their starting salaries are only $40,000 a year, and they have members who have worked for the city for 25 years without making the same company that a brand new cop makes. UE Local 150 is calling for a 6% annual adjustment and a 15% raise for sanitation and maintenance workers. Amazon workers in Garner, North Carolina, organizing with Carolina Amazonians United for Solidarity and Empowerment, went on strike at RDU1 Fulfillment Center with the support of the Teamsters Union and picketers from the group that unionized in California and has been on strike for months now. The striking North Carolina workers called for, among other things, $30 an hour, safer facilities, and more due process in the discipline procedure. More than 100 registered nurses from HCA facilities across the country, the largest hospital system in the United States, held a rally on November 30th outside of HCA's West Florida division in Tampa, Florida. National Nurses Organizing Committee and National Nurses United announced last week. Nurses say that their protest was intended to send a message to management about nurse unity and solidarity in the face of mismanagement at their hospitals across the country, and it comes ahead of a wave of union contract expirations next year. Had a few policy, politics, and legislation updates last week. Dialyzer manufacturer Baxter Corporation in Alabama received $3.3 million in incentives from the city of Opelika in the state of Alabama. In exchange, it had to hire and keep at least 200 employees through last year. Now, no sooner than their obligations expired, they are laying off hundreds of workers as of 30 November and will be completely closed by the second half of 2024. Without a union contract, the employees have no guaranteed severance or layoff procedure, which is common in most union contracts. Instead, they're at the mercy of the company. Baxter states they will receive some severance, but it is unclear how much or if it will be consistently paid to all employees. They have also not indicated how the first round of layoffs will be decided. Most union contracts will say that mass layoffs will be decided by seniority. Speaking of incentives, Alabama is funding with state dollars, I checked this, $30 million EV Workforce Training Center in Decatur through the Education Trust Fund. According to Alabama Daily News, as conditioned for receiving the $30 million in funding, AIDT must provide a 50% discount on tickets for Alabama school-aged children to tour the facility.
Wait, what? It's a tour thing? Oh.
No, it's a training center, but children can go for 50% off. On a tour.
I'm so confused by this.
I'm not.
Is it a tourist attraction or is it a training center? Like, what's
not
going
totally
on?
understanding exactly what it is either.
Okay.
And they must, and also AIDT must not request additional state funding for a minimum of 10 years. In total, the $30 million represents nearly 27% of the entire Commerce Department's supplemental budget of $111.6 million. The Federal Railroad Administration has recommended the rail industry beef up their preparations for and response to adverse weather events, including infrastructure assessments. From FreightWaves, an industry news outlet, FRA pointed out that since the start of 2021, there have been 123 rail incidents in which severe weather conditions or weather-related events may have contributed in part or in whole to those accidents. Additionally, the UAW International Union last week became the latest and largest union to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. If we missed anything, let us know. 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857, and we can include it in next week's Last Week in Southern Labor.
Also, we had a listener who said just a small correction. Constantine said that West Virginia City is pronounced Hurricane, not hurricane. So just getting the record straight.
Hurricane. Okay, that's kind of That's kind of like Fedville.
Fedville, yes. The land of feds.
There you go. All right, folks. No, Fayetteville.
I know. I'm
Fayetteville.
just kidding.
Okay. Yeah, because Alabama, because Huntsville would kind of be
it's
definitely
definitely
the land of feds. But
definitely
no, I'm
the
talking about
Fayetteville
Fayetteville, Tennessee.
Alabama.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and take a break. We're going to be right back, and we're going to break down this UAW campaign announcement. It's big, folks. Stay tuned. Benefit Architects has proudly supported union members and union-made products for over 35 years. If you are a federal employee and an AFGE member, you're eligible for hundreds of dollars in money-saving benefits, including group life insurance, dental insurance, and AFLAC insurance. Additionally, if you're a union member but don't work for the federal government, you can still qualify for several of these money-saving policies. So give Tate Hure a call at 256-215-6769 for details and to enroll. Again, that is Tate Hure at 256-215-6769.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and family members are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough even to keep their jobs. We can fix this. It's time for us to find a way to close the health care coverage gap so that people can remain at work. Let's make this a priority. Let's close this gap and cover Alabama. To learn more and how you can help, visit coveralabama.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law, the name with proven results.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. Ben Jobe filling in for Adam Keller this week. Appreciate it, Ben.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We got a question in the chat about the Teamsters rally in Jacksonville, Florida. It's going to be Friday, December the 8th at 10 a.m. at 111 Bush Drive, Jacksonville, Florida. That's where it's going to be. If you want to go, that's all we know. That's what's on the flyer. So go if you're in the area, and take a video and send it to us if you're able. 30 people watching now, 16 likes. What is up with that? Like the stream if you are watching, please. Okay, so the UAW, like I said, is oh, and also good morning, Joe and Mel. Appreciate everybody for in the Facebook chat for joining us. I believe that I'm going to be seeing Mel and Joe at the Labor Council meeting on Monday. If you're a union member here in North Alabama, you should go to the Labor Council meetings. They're open to the public. You can, and anybody's welcome at them. So if you'd like to come to the Labor Council meeting, then feel free. You can reach out to me for details on that. And we're going to be having elections on Monday, at December 4th. So it'll be a good time to come in and come in and hang out with us. The UAW is, they have announced the largest organizing drive in modern history. And Barry Eidlin mentioned on Twitter that, and Barry Eidlin is historian and former union organizer. He mentioned that given the location of many of these auto plants being organized, this is also the most serious effort to organize the U.S. South since the CIO's Operation Dixie in 1940. Dang. So this is a huge deal, enormous ramifications for the South, for the auto industry, and you know, another reason that it's important is that you know, despite all of the kind of popular understanding about manufacturing being outsourced and there's no manufacturing in the United States anymore, manufacturing still contributed 11% of the value added to the GDP in 2022, as compared to 8.5% for education, healthcare, and social assistance. So still a very big part of the economy. Any path to labor union power in the United States is going to have to come from, going to have to go through the manufacturing sector and through the U.S. South, because the U.S. South has been the Achilles heel of the labor movement for ages. Politicians have constantly been using us, working people in the South, to undercut working people in other parts of the United States, and exploiting us and squeezing more profits out of us. And so the UAW is making a big bet on workers in the South and across the country, saying, you know, enough is enough, and we're going to take more of the value that we're creating. So let's listen to this announcement that they put up last week.
If you're an auto worker in this country, it's time to stand up. Everywhere you look in the auto industry, corporate profits are soaring and workers' wages are falling behind. We've shown the world that this industry is harming workers and consumers to the benefit of company executives and the rich. And it's time that the working class did something about it. But it's not just the big three. It's across the auto industry. CEOs are raking in billions while auto workers' real wages are falling. Car prices are through the roof, but workers can't afford to buy the vehicles they make. Wall Street is making a killing, but our communities are being left behind.
Tesla set to announce their third quarter results, but that they still aim to keep annual target deliveries of 1.8 million vehicles for the full year.
Rivian boosting its full year production. The company also second quarter revenue coming in better than the street was looking for.
But what about the other automakers? Let's talk about Toyota, Honda, Hyundai, Nissan, Subaru, and Mazda. The Japanese and Korean six made nearly twice as much as the big three in the past decade. A whopping $470 billion in profits, $500 billion, with over 40% of their revenue coming from their North American operations. Don't auto workers at Toyota, Honda, Hyundai, Nissan, Subaru, and Mazda deserve a record cut of those record profits? And how about the German three, Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes? They've made almost the same as the Japanese and Korean companies, $460 billion in the past 10 years. Do Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes workers not deserve their fair share of this booming auto industry? Big three auto workers at Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis just won big raises, more job security, and cost of living adjustments for one simple reason: they're organized.
Without a deal, automakers went on strike at midnight.
With targeted strikes at 3 facilities, a Ford plant in Michigan, a GM plant in Missouri, and an Ohio plant for Chrysler owner Stellantis.
The UAW was underestimated the whole way because when the game was over, it was just a real beatdown. The workers win.
To all the auto workers out there working without the benefits of a union, now it's your turn. Since we began our stand-up strike, the response from auto workers at non-union companies has been overwhelming. Workers across the country, from the West to the Midwest, and especially in the South, are reaching out to join our movement and to join the UAW. So go to uaw.org/join. The money is there, the time is right, and the answer is simple. You don't have to live paycheck to paycheck. You don't have to worry about how you're going to pay your rent or feed your family while the company makes billions. A better life is out there. It starts with you, UAW.
All right, so there it is, folks. UAW.org/join is where, and so with that announcement, they have dropped cards in every single non-union auto plant in the country, more or less. And so if you are a non-union automaker anywhere, you can go to uaw.org/join. And what comes up is a list of 13 non-union automakers. Those are the non-union automakers that they are targeting. And so you scroll down, it's like in alphabetical order, looks like. No, not quite alphabetical order. But you scroll down, find the company that you work for, and you can stand up and sign your union card. And in each section where it has cards for each non-union auto company, it gives you a breakdown of some important statistics and stuff. And, so relevant for Huntsville, where we have a Toyota Mazda plant, Toyota in the last 10 years has made $250 billion in profit over the past decade. $250 billion in profit, not revenue, profit. Profits are up 30%. CEO pay is up 125%. Meanwhile, Toyota has just offered a 9% raise to convince Toyota workers not to organize. So the UAW says it's time for Toyota workers to stand up and fight for more, and it's the first one. So if you're in Huntsville, uaw.org/join. That's the first company on the list. You can sign your card, and that says, you want the UAW to be your union, and it'll give your information to the UAW. They'll be able to reach out to you for more. But yeah, really, really, really important stuff. And I have been heartened by folks in the area saying that they were going to send this. They were going to send this this announcement to people that they knew that worked at Toyota here in Huntsville, and the reply came back from this person: "Oh yeah, I've already signed my union card, and so have all of my other coworkers. So yeah, we're way ahead of you, buddy. We've already signed cards. So yeah, I mean, hugely consequential announcement." Obviously, this is going to be good for Toyota workers here in the area and non-union auto workers across the country. And if you're a Toyota worker here in Huntsville, you're listening to the program, I would love to hear from you. 844-899-8857 is the phone number. And if you call in, and you're a Toyota worker, also send us a text message saying, hey, this is my phone number. I'm a Toyota worker here in Huntsville, and I want to talk. That way we can make sure to get to you, because sometimes we don't have time for calls, but But we would there are other times where we want to make sure that we're able to get to certain people or certain groups of people that are relevant that we think that our audience would like to hear from. So Toyota workers here in Huntsville, 844-899-8857. It's the phone number, 844-899-TVLR. But one thing that a lot of folks will notice about this campaign is that it's a lot different from kind of the standard operating procedure over the last 10, 20, 30 years of union campaigns, which is slow, methodical, don't go public until you've hit like 60, 70% of people in the plant already signed cards because you don't want to draw attention to yourself before your organizing committee is ready and has inoculated a bunch of people. And this organizing campaign is not that, right? They have just announced to every non-union automaker in the country, we are coming for you. We're coming from you. We're coming for you, and we're not hiding it. We want your workers to sign cards today. That's what we're looking for. And so the reason for that, and Barry Eidlin has a great Twitter thread on this, really kind of laying it out in a very eloquent manner. The central hypothesis, and this is Barry talking, which is now going to be tested in practice, is that workers across the auto industry have been galvanized by the UAW's stand-up strike at the Big Three and are now ready to organize. So rather than go about this, the kind of traditional, slow, methodical, one plant at a time in secret, patiently building up a campaign there, the union sees its job today as amplifying a wave that is already in motion. That means broadcasting the message that the union is ready to fight and inviting non-union auto workers across the country to join them. And so, that's the gamble that they're taking, and we're going to see if it's going to pay off. I'm very hopeful that it will pay off. I'm very hopeful that it will. And so we'll obviously see. Luis Leon, friend of the show, staff writer for Labor Notes, he, I think, undoubtedly, it's just, it's so good, I don't think it's really debatable that Luis wrote the definitive article on the announcement. So you can read his article at labornotes.org. The title of the article is Auto Workers Direct Momentum Toward Organizing Plants Across the U.S. by Luis Feliz Leon. And the reason that it's the definitive article in my mind is that no other article that I've read includes so many voices of non-union auto workers. There's just no other article out there that you will hear from as many non-union auto workers. It's really amazing the work that Luis has been able to put in and the information and the testimony that he's been able to put in this article. It's really great. And so I'm going to read a little bit from it. He says that at Rivian's electric plant in Bloomington, Illinois. Oh, and before we get to those testimonies, I want to highlight that there's already movement, right? There's already campaigns catching fire even before the announcement was made official. So at Rivian's electric plant in Bloomington, Illinois, workers have already built an organizing committee and surveyed 1,000 of their coworkers on major job improvements and run petitions demanding longer breaks. There are about 5,000 workers at this plant. And local news in Kentucky have reported that according to the union, one of the strongest campaigns in the country is at Toyota's Georgetown, Kentucky assembly complex, where 7,800 workers make the company's iconic Camry and highly profitable RAV4 and Lexus ES. So lots of, there's lots of movement already, and the announcement was just made official. And so the plan is, according to Luis in Labor Notes, officially, once 30% of workers at any given plant have signed union cards, workers there will go public with their campaign, right? So the broad campaign is public, but at each plant, once 30% have signed cards, then that committee is going to go public, say, hey, we're public here. We've got a campaign here, and we're making moves. And some plants have already met that threshold, according to the UAW. And so we could potentially induce that the Tesla Fremont, California plant has already met that mark because they have gone public and said there's an organizing committee here. We're forming a union. And that would be huge because that plant employs 20,000 people. So if they've already got 30% of the cards signed at that plant, that is enormous. At the 50% mark, workers are going to rally their coworkers, families, and neighbors and community leaders. And then as soon as 70% of the workers at a given plant sign cards and have a committee made up of workers from every shift and job classification, they will demand voluntary recognition of their union. And if the company refuses, the workers will file for an election with the National Labor Relations Board. So that's kind of evidence that it's already taken off and some of the plan going forward. And now we'll get to some of the worker testimony that is so important when looking at this campaign. So at Rivian, Williams said, this is a Rivian worker in Illinois, Williams said that workers' main workplace concerns revolve around safety and time off. Injuries include a crushed hand, a broken foot, a sliced ear, and broken ribs, according to complaints filed with OSHA. Workers attribute these injuries to the breakneck pace of production. And there's worse to come. Just this month, the company raised its production forecast for the full year by 2,000 vehicles to 54,000 units. In 2022, workers often put in 12-hour days, 7 days a week. But Williams said the company changed its schedule to 12-hour shifts, 4 days a week, in anticipation of Illinois' one-day rest in 7 Act, where an employee is entitled to at least 1 day off in any consecutive 7-day period. That law went into effect January 2023. So that's,
So we're back to fighting for a weekend for these guys.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a really and that shows the importance of having a legislature that doesn't hate you and that doesn't want you ground into powder like so many Republicans do. So, Rivian has found other ways to monopolize workers' time, including reducing their sick hours from 80 per year, 80 sick hours a year, which is like 2 weeks. Like,
on a 12-hour shift? Do they count the whole 12?
Yeah,
like, what's going on
that's
there?
crazy. You get 80 hours. So that's even if you get a full 40-hour work week there, you get max 2 weeks off. If they count the 12 hours, you were scheduled for a 12-hour shift, and then that 80 hours is going to run out really quick, right? Okay, so they cut that in half to 40 hours a year in January 2023. That's insane. Meanwhile, salaried employees have unlimited paid vacations, according to a screenshot shared with Labor Notes. Workers have also filed complaints with OSHA over a lack of fire exits. Insane. At Hyundai in Montgomery, Alabama, a 12-year team member, Gilbert Brooks, has had organizing a union on his mind since he was hired. He had been a member of the steelworkers for 11 years at the Goodyear Tire Factory in Anniston. And at Hyundai, 3,500 hourly, temporary, and contract employees assemble the Santa Fe, Tucson, and Santa Cruz, the Genesis GV70, and the electrified GV70. We build 1,500 cars a day and 500 cars a shift. That's pretty crazy. When measured by the speed of cars produced, this is the second most productive plant in the world. That high productivity, he says, should be rewarded with higher wages. Absolutely. He earns $28 an hour, which will go up to $30 an hour in January after the promised wage hike. That's after 11 years at the company, right? The company is also offering a $4,000 bonus. New hires start at around $19 an hour. That is not much. Over the past 3 years, Hyundai's profits have soared 75%, while its vehicle prices rose 32%. We are underpaid and overworked, Brooks said. His point of comparison is what his ex-wife will earn at GM's Spring Hill plant in Tennessee. She'll go from $25 an hour to $35 an hour right away under the new UAW contract at GM. But the main sticking points are safety and respect on the job. He said the company forces workers to do jobs that really require 2 people and changes work rules on a whim, and the result is injuries. So he talks about some of the injuries that he's had and how in 2014, when they first tried to unionize this plant, the company didn't even offer light duty for injured workers. But once word spread around the plant that a unionization campaign was afoot, Hyundai used a mix of carrots and sticks to beat back the union drive, including offering light duty and bonuses. I mean, offering light duty is such a, that's actually law. That's a reasonable accommodation. You have to do that. And so the fact that they weren't doing that is pretty bonkers.
Love to move them goalposts
really,
a little bit
really
further.
Yeah, just so gross. There's testimony from Mercedes-Benz in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, talking about how Alabama gave $300 million in tax breaks to Mercedes-Benz, and that, quoting from a New York Times article, saying that is 18 times what Tennessee paid for a Nissan plant in 1980. This was in 1996. We gave them $300 million in 1996. That's 18 times what Tennessee paid for a Nissan plant in 1980, more than 7 times what Tennessee paid for a General Motors Saturn plant in 1985, 4 times what Kentucky paid for a Toyota plant in 1985, and 3 times what South Carolina paid for a BMW plant in 1992. Really crazy, crazy stuff. And so I love seeing those workers' testimony from Luis's article, really important. And so this is really really a big deal. Hopefully, this may be kind of the signal that the fortress unionism, as Jesselson coined it, is coming to an end, and the time is to come out of our fortress. And his thesis in the essay Fortress Unionism was basically, at the time, like a decade or two ago, look, we're in a period where we can't organize on a mass scale. The momentum, the material conditions are just not there. And so the job of the labor movement is to do fortress unionism, is to huddle inside our castles, protect it at all costs, do everything we can to protect the gains that we've made, and be ready for when workers say they want to organize. And so that's kind of what unions ended up doing over the last 30 years. And we've talked to Chris Boehner about how we are the most wealthy labor movement in the history of the world. We have more money at our disposal than any other labor movement in the history of the world. And so if we want to take fortress unionism seriously, it's like, well, this is the time to come out of the fortress, I think, and make an attack. So uaw.org/join if you're a non-union auto worker, uaw.org/join. Really big stuff here. Looking at the chat, and then we'll go to our guests. We got our guests in the Zoom. But appreciate everybody tuning in. We've got almost 50 people watching us. 26 people have liked the stream. If you haven't liked the stream, then do that if you can. There's some conversation about the Swedish unions trying to shut down Tesla with impunity. They live in a country that values workers, so there's always complete impunity for strikes and strikers. Yeah, that's really important, and we have talked about that, and I've reached out to some journalists in Sweden and Norway to try to get them to come on the show and talk to us about that and give us some more detail. But you can go check out our videos and see us talking about that a couple of weeks ago. Ethan says good morning. Mark says good morning. Corky Geek Girl, good morning. Appreciate everybody on the stream tuning in and saying hello. Okay, so I said that we've got a nurse on the line from South Carolina. Her name is Hannah Drummond, RN, in the emergency room at Mission Hospital in Asheville, North Carolina. North Carolina, not South Carolina. I apologize, Hannah. Working at Mission Hospital in Asheville, North Carolina. She is the chief nurse representative for her shop for National Nurses United, the union there. Hannah, welcome to the program. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, really excited to have you. So last week we got the press release about the rally in Tampa, Florida. I'm not sure if you were one of the ones at the rally, but Lucy said that you would be definitely one that would be good to talk about the issues at hand. And so, can you just talk to us about why y'all went down to Tampa, Florida? What was, why Tampa? Why in Florida? What's the deal with that? And what was the message you were trying to send?
Yeah, so I actually was one of the nurses at the rally. And we got together with nurses from all across the country. So my hospital is owned by Hospital Corporation of America, HCA, for those who aren't familiar. And they have a lot of hospitals in West Florida. So we are gearing up for our contract campaign coming into 2024. And I think something that's really unique about nurses is that our working conditions really affect the health and well-being of our communities. And in HCA specifically, we're seeing a manufactured staffing crisis. We're seeing a willful under-resourcing of staff, whether it be nurses, EVS workers, phlebotomists, techs, to maximize their profits and really prioritize their shareholders over patients and human lives. So we all took time out of our weeks on our days off to get down to Tampa, Florida, in front of the regional headquarters and let them know that we're here and we're ready to fight. And we are once again calling on them to put patients first.
One of the big things that y'all are wanting to attack in this cycle of contract negotiations is staffing levels, and this has been a really a theme across across a lot of these nurses unions and during contract campaigns. The Roberts Wood Johnson Hospital in New Jersey, they actually, I think this morning just reached a tentative agreement, and the union says that they've agreed to some safe staffing levels. That's what the strike was over. They've been on strike for months now over safe staffing levels, and that's a super just to underscore for the audience, right? When nurses go on strike, it has historically not been about pay or salary, right? It's been about we just want enough people so that we can take care of people. What is the risk to me as a patient if you don't have safe staffing levels?
I mean, starting out from the top down, death is the first risk. If there's not enough people, like death is never not on the table when they put us in these situations. But it also means like your mom might not be able to get up and go to the bathroom, and I can't go help her go to the bathroom. So then she goes in the bed. In my hospital and our ER, it means that you could be stuck in a hallway bed for days. It could mean that your meds are late. It could mean that you have a longer hospital stay. You're at a higher risk for, hospital-related infections and just all kinds of worse outcomes. And we know this because when California and the work of California Nurses Association, which is under, the same umbrella as us with National Nurses United, their union pushed to get safe staffing written into their legislation. And when you look at their patient outcomes, they're better than anywhere else in the country. When you look at their turnover levels and their retention levels, they're better than anywhere else in the country.
Right. Yeah, can you talk to us a little bit more about that California law? Because I listened to, and I meant to re-listen to it before the show today, but I didn't have time. But a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, Bernie Sanders held a hearing on nurse staffing levels under the U.S. Senate's Health, Education, and Labor Committee, and had a lot of several nurses from across the country, including California Nurses Association, talking about this. And I can't remember exactly what the law required, and maybe you can fill that in, but the law basically said, look, you have to have X amount of nurses per patient. And that has resulted in, like you mentioned, nurse retention, but also better care for the patients, right? Is there any numbers that you can give us for that?
Yeah, so I think the most accessible level there is when we talk about like a medical surgical unit. When we use that word, that's kind of like the normal ward or floor that everybody thinks of in the hospital. That's the most stable patients that are in the hospital. May have a shorter stay. In California, the law is that nurse has no more than 4 patients. So when that nurse goes above those 4 patients, the risk of patient death increases by 7%. And that's just within the most stable, least sick patients in the hospital. And what that means is that nurse is being given the ample amount of resources to care for their patient. They're not spread thin. Sometimes in my hospital in North Carolina, they've tried to give upwards of 6 or 7 patients to that nurse on the same kind of floor. So you're upping the risk of death to 21%, but you're also, if you have 6 patients over a 12-hour shift, and then over the course of an hour, that gives you like 5 minutes per patient. How are you supposed to get everything done you need to get done with 5 minutes per patient?
Right.
And those numbers, I think, really make it real.
Right.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in. I don't know if people know this. I'm also a nurse, so thank you for your service, by the way. But yeah, and I had no idea that was even a law in some place, but it makes total sense because where I work in an Alabama hospital, yeah, floor nurses can have 8, 9 patients at a time. And now with COVID numbers and flu surges, you got hall beds for ER, and they're kind of transferring those into hall beds for patients. So it's like, you can't have 3-to-1, 4-to-1 caseloads and expect people to even physically be there in time.
And Hannah, I wanted to give you a couple other things about Alabama, and you can tell me how. And then I'm interested in hearing what are some of the, so 4-to-1 sounds kind of like the recommendation. That's what you said the California law is. So I'd be interested in hearing what if you're able to figure out what the average nurse to patient ratio is across HCA systems. I know that I'm sure it varies because, like you said, it's the largest hospital corporation in the country, which is, I don't know if it's a good thing to have hospital corporations. Maybe that's something that we could talk about at a later time. But
it's not. The short answer is it's not.
There you go. So okay, but so here in Alabama, and this is according to the Alabama Board of Nursing, a total of 38,727 experienced nurses in Alabama indicated that they intend, not that they have thought about, they intend to leave the profession within 5 years. Shared during a recent meeting of the Legislative Healthcare Task Force, the survey also revealed that based on current trends, nurse vacancies in the state could grow to as high as 14,000 by 2027, nearly double the current nurse shortage of 7,200. As nurses in Alabama are the second lowest median salary in the nation at $56,000, ahead only of South Dakota's $55,000, many have taken on second jobs, further contributing to burnout and eventual retirement. Of the 84,779 Alabama nurses that participated in the survey, roughly 58,000 of them have indicated they have a second job, 37,000 of which spend at least 32 hours at that second job. So I'm interested in your reaction to that, and then the staffing levels at some of those hospitals, and then if that is something that you're seeing across the country at these hospital locations as well, nurses having to get second jobs because they don't have enough money to make ends meet.
Yeah, I would say that's not a unique experience, especially in less unionized areas. But I really get a visceral reaction when folks use the word shortage, and our states and our governing bodies use this word shortage. We have more nurses coming out of nursing school than we ever have in the history of the United States. We have over 5 million registered nurses with a license in this country. Over 1 million of them are not working as a nurse at all anymore. And it all roots back to this uninhabitable, morally distressing, morally injuring work environment. When we see human lives and human beings not being valued, that weighs on you. We take that home with us. We got into this profession to help people. And, when I hear that 38,000 nurses in Alabama have an intent to leave the profession, there's no shortage there. That's 38,000 people who have a license. So that's once again a manufactured crisis. And like you said earlier, when we go on strike, it's not about money. It's always about patient safety. And I think if we saw similar legislation, and when I mentioned those ratios earlier, that 4-to-1 is just the most stable patients. Those ratios get less and less and less the sicker your patients are.
Right.
How many more people would stay in their profession if they weren't put in these difficult situations every single day, where we walk out and we feel like, oh my gosh, my patients didn't get the care they deserved. When it comes to HCA staffing, it's apples and oranges with the union HCA hospitals versus the non-union HCA hospitals. They've tried to give my nurses here in North Carolina, 10 or more patients, and we've been able to fight back. We're still not where we should be. We're often 6-to-1, but we see our counterparts in Florida who are not union that are taking 13 patients. Wow. That on the step down floor where you should be 1 to 3, you're taking 6 or 7 or 8. I just talked with nurses from Colorado at an HCA facility that are saying it's normal in the ICU to have 4 patients. The recommendation in ICU is 2 to 1 or sometimes even 1 to 1, and they're taking 4.
Wow. That's that's horrifying, as that's horrifying as somebody. So my grandmother has had a stroke over the last few months, and now she's requiring 24/7 care, and she's back home, and the family's basically providing that care for her. We're taking shifts and stuff. My grandfather just had an incident where he had to go to the hospital, so I'm anticipating a lot of hospital visits in the near future, with my grandparents and the help that they're in right now. And that is, that's horrifying to hear. That my guess is just going to be that it's, especially given what I just told you about Alabama's, the way that our nurses are treated here, I don't figure it's any better here in the hospitals in Alabama. So, that's very, very scary to me as a a member of the community, somebody who has family members who are going to go to the hospital, who've been to the hospital, and who I've been to the hospital before. I have anaphylactic allergies and stuff, and I've had to go in the last few years for allergic reactions, and that's just that's very, very scary. And so what is the union proposing to address this in these contracts, and when do they expire?
So we expire over different timelines next year. My hospital is the last one to expire on July 2nd. We haven't sat down at the negotiating table yet, so I can't speak to specific proposals that we have. But what I can speak to is at my hospital, when we started our first negotiations with our contract, and we're a brand new union. We just won our election in 2020. We just ratified our first contract in 2021. We thought that the staffing that they proposed from the hospital when we got our union was pretty good. And what we asked was that the hospital uphold their own proposed staffing grids on our units. And what I've seen them do is violate that at every turn that they can, and then tout this nursing shortage as the reason why. But yet I see them invest in short-term solutions with travelers. I have seen, some years in multiple departments that I've worked at this hospital, over 70% turnover.
Yeah. Wow.
70% turnover. And so what we would like to see...
If we could pull out and sit on that tangent for a second about the travel nurses, which is not to, I don't think anybody is going to say travel nurse is bad unless you're like scabbing. Okay. That's a different, that's not good to scab. But just travel nursing in general, no condemnation there. Mm-hmm. But the how does that feel as a nurse there at these locations where travel nurses are coming in making, I know a travel nurse. I am like very close to a travel nurse who is now settled down in California in a union hospital, right? She's making a lot of money. But she did travel nurse, and she was at some places making $100 more an hour than her counterparts, right? And so why not, instead of paying 3 or 4 times for one person, why not pay the salary of 2 or 3 or 4 people and keep them there? What's the deal with that?
The math ain't mathin', right?
Yeah.
We've asked that question. But I know, in my hospital, if you have a traveler instead of a bargaining unit nurse, then they're not going to push back in the same way. And, especially at HCA, they love to have temporary workers. They love to have new nurses, because new nurses don't know anything different in the working environments they're in, and temporary workers are there temporarily.
You can throw all sorts of rules on them,
and they're getting and they're getting paid, and then they'll leave. And just to really pick on this corporation that's in charge of the most hospitals in the country, that's also the richest healthcare corporation in the world.
Wait a second now, Hannah. So you're telling me that they're not sharing the pain with you as a family? right? You're having to work all these shifts and take on all these patients. Surely they're sacrificing and they're not taking any additional profits or giving their CEOs raises or anything. That would seems like strange because they're family with you. Right?
They've seen record-breaking profits every quarter since the pandemic hit.
Wow.
I believe it's $5.6 billion already this year.
Wow.
Well, and I could speak
and
on...
that's from their own numbers.
And we've had 10 or 12 people just in my unit over the last year or two, especially after COVID, leaving for travel jobs because when you're the second worst paying place in the country and they'll be traveling 2 hours or something. It's not even like they're going to very far, and these are, this is a system that's within our state and they're still outsourcing for whatever reason. It's absurd.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned that about how travel nurses are less likely to push back. That's such an important point. And my friend actually told me about this, right? She said, look, if I go to a hospital that's, treating me badly, I'll just put up with it for my assignment and then I'm gone, right? And because... And there's a really great investigation in these times, The Big Business Behind Travel Nursing by Alice Herman. I don't know if you've read this, Hannah, but I it's something that may interest you. But it talked about how how she talked to some people who had pushed back as a travel nurse, who then stopped getting calls to be nurses in different places, right? So there's, even like perversely, as they're making all this money, they're kind of the most precarious.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally true. And, I think it speaks back to the bigger issue of why collectivism is important. And don't get me wrong, I'm thankful to have extra people in the door to help take care of my patients because in the interim, we need people with skills to save lives, especially, my emergency department services 19 counties in Western North Carolina. That's so important. But you're putting yourself on an island as a traveler, whether you're in a union facility or not in a union facility. And, I think part of the reason we're all here today on this show is because we want good rights and good wages and good work environments for all workers, regardless of your trade. And we want to see these corporate honchos be held accountable and not be raking in on these profits while we have people getting injured and people suffering and people dying on the job.
Right. So y'all are going to be pushing for safer staffing levels in your contract negotiations across HCA in 2024. We will keep an eye on it. Feel free to reach out if you ever, if there's ever anything that you think our audience ought to know about. And happy to have you on again. You've been great to talk to, Hannah. I appreciate your time. Is there anything else that you think that right now you'd want to make sure that our audience knows before we let you go?
I would just say if you have nurses in Alabama who want to have the good things that my union hospital has, reach out to the National Nurses Organizing Committee. We're ready and fighting already in the South, and we got your back.
Amen.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Hannah. All right. Hannah Drummond, RN in the emergency room at Mission Hospital in Asheville, North Carolina, chief nurse representative in her shop for the National Nurses United. Really appreciated her time. Really great interview. Really enjoyed that. So with that, we're going to go ahead and take a break. We're going to be right back. We're going to talk about what bosses were up to in the South last week. Don't go anywhere.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and neighbors are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough to keep their jobs. We need to fix this. Let's close the health care coverage gap. To learn more, visit coveralabama.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Ironworkers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Ironworkers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'm Attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
As labor union members, we face our share of challenges in the workplace. But today, I want to talk about a different kind of challenge, the climate crisis. We've all seen the fury of Mother Nature, the storms that can turn lives upside down in an instant. That's why Hometown Action is launching our Climate Protection Project. We're heading out to 10 rural communities, listening to local folks, and taking action with them to protect communities impacted by climate disasters. And we need you, our union brothers and sisters, to join us. Together, we'll make a difference. Our strength on the job is undeniable, and now it's time to put that strength to work for the planet. Let's protect our communities, our families, and our future. Visit hometownaction.org today and sign up to volunteer for the Climate Protection Campus.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host Ben Job, as Adam is out of town this week. Appreciate you tuning in. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. If you would like to give us a call or send us a text message, you are free to do so. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Like the stream if you haven't. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Subscribe to the podcast if you're listening there. Let's go ahead and get to Boss Watch, because bosses are all the time breaking the law. Despite that, you only ever see Mugshots of working people on your local news. Working people who engaged in various criminal activities as low as petty theft or trespassing. You might see their
competitive
mugshot.
pay, great benefits, and so much more. Here at Lee Company, we do right by...
You hear that, man?
Yeah, sorry. I'm just getting the YouTube stream cut out for a second. I'm trying to get it set back up.
Whoops.
We're
Okay.
still rolling, though. Do your thing.
Cool. Yeah, so you're going to see the mugshots of working people on the local news all the time, but not the mugshots of bosses. So we want to provide a corrective to that. So here are a couple of highlights of the illegal activities of bosses in the southern United States and the American colonies for the week ending on December the 1st. Over in Florida, a federal workplace safety investigation found a South Bay Correctional and Rehabilitation Facility failed to follow recognized safety procedures, leaving employees vulnerable to violent attacks and injuries, including one worker who a patient reportedly struck in the face with a rock. The U.S. Department of Labor's Occupational Safety and Health Administration began an investigation into the incident after GEO Group Incorporated, which operates as South Bay Correctional and Rehabilitation Facility, a private prison, another thing that we should not have, private prison corporations. Not a good thing for society. Reported the worker's hospitalization 2 days after the incident occurred, which is a violation of OSHA's rule requiring employers to report an inpatient hospitalization of an employee within 24 hours. Agency investigators learned an inmate violently attacked a nurse with a rock enclosed in his fist as the nurse held the medical waiting room door open for a wheelchair-bound inmate. As a result of the attack, the nurse suffered a broken nasal bone and cuts on her forehead. OSHA cited GEO Group for a serious violation for failing to provide a workplace free from recognized safety and health hazards, including inmates' physical assaults which caused or were likely to cause serious physical harm. The agency also issued a citation for other than serious violation of not reporting workplace incident leading to an employee's hospitalization within 24 hours as required. OSHA assessed about $27,000 in proposed penalties for the facility's operator. And then just some background here. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention estimate the rate of non-fatal assault on hospital workers at 8.3 per 10,000 workers, significantly higher than the rate of 2 per 10,000 workers in all private sector industries. Wow. From December 2013 to January 1st, 2017, the GEO Group Incorporated entered into a corporate-wide settlement regarding workplace violence hazards with OSHA, requiring the company to develop a violence prevention and safety program that involved training employees and creating a workplace safety committee to address violence and patterns in its facility. The GEO Group Incorporated operates 102 facilities with a workforce of 7,500 employees nationwide. In the South Bay Correctional and Rehabilitation is a 2,000-bed institution that houses adult males with custody levels ranging from minimum to maximum security with 357 employees who care for them. And the company has 15 business days from the receipt of the citation and penalties to comply, request an informal conference with OSHA, or contest the findings. In the coal mining industry, the U.S. Department of Labor announced yesterday that its Mine Safety and Health Administration completed impact inspections at 13 mines in 10 states in October 2023, issuing over 200 violations. MSHA began impact inspections after an April 2010 explosion in West Virginia at the Upper Big Branch mine that killed 29 miners. To date, impact inspections in 2023 have identified over 2,300 violations, including over 600 significant and substantial and 46 unwarrantable failure findings. A significant and substantial violation is one reasonably likely to cause a reasonably serious injury or illness. Violations designated as unwarrantable failures occur when an inspector finds aggravated conduct that constitutes more than ordinary negligence. The agency conducts impact inspections at mines that merit increased agency attention and enforcement due to poor compliance history, previous accidents, injuries and illnesses, and other compliance concerns. Of the 215 violations that MSHA identified in October, 50 were identified as serious and significant, and 6 had unwarrantable failure findings. The agency completed October's inspections at mines in Alabama, Colorado, Illinois, Kentucky, Michigan, Missouri, Pennsylvania, Utah, Virginia, and West Virginia. The October 2023 impact inspections show miners' safety and health continues to be put at risk in ways that are completely preventable, said Assistant Secretary for Mine Safety and Health Chris Williamson. We remain troubled and concerned with the continued trend in our impact inspections. This trend includes inspectors finding violations that put miners' lives at risk, such as float coal dust, improper fall protection, and a lack of adequate workplace examinations. The Longview mine in Volga, West Virginia, was among the mines that MSHA inspected in October. Selected given its history of accidents and inadequate examinations, the mine is operated by Century Mining, LLC. The inspection found at this one mine 12 violations, including 3 serious and significant and 4 unwarrantable failure findings. The inspection led the agency to issue an imminent danger order. Specifically, MSHA found accumulations of float coal dust on 2 separate conveyor belt lines, resulting in 2 unwarrantable failure orders. Inadequate examinations on the same conveyor belt, resulting in 2 more unwarrantable failure orders. Inadequate examinations have contributed to serious mine accidents and have been identified as a root cause in several mining fatalities in 2023. MSHA has placed a priority on improving workplace examinations, including the identification, correction, and documentation of hazardous conditions to ensure miners' safety and health. They found two miners working for a contractor that were observed on a roof 20 feet above ground, wearing safety harnesses that were not tied off as required. MSHA issued an imminent danger order and a related serious and significant citation and withdrew the 2 miners from the mine. MSHA issued a safety alert in 2023 regarding falls from heights and continues to remind operators and contractors on best practices for preventing falls, such as designing an effective fall prevention and protection program, as well as providing task training. Violations are not just numbers. Each one represent a hazard to miners whose safety, health, and lives are being put at risk needlessly. MSHA will continue to enforce the law while also providing compliance assistance to mine operators so that the mining industry makes progress in reversing the troubling upward trend in fatalities. And just a reminder for our audience on the conservative radio station WVNN here in Huntsville, the Mine Safety and Health Administration is the government agency that Trump appointed a coal executive to head when he was president. And that same coal executive who Trump appointed killed a regulation that would save thousands of coal miners' lives from death by black lung. So that's a guy that loves coal miners, killing, literally responsible for the deaths of thousands of them a year. That's how you know he cares about them. Over in Georgia, a federal investigation has determined a Cartersville chemical manufacturer could have prevented a 52-year-old leach tank operator from suffering fatal chemical and thermal burns over most of his body in June 2023 by following required safety regulations. Investigators with the U.S. Department of Labor's Occupational Safety and Health Administration determined that a Chemical Products Corporation employee on the job just 2 months opened an air intake valve to inspect a noise coming from a barium sulfide wash cone with a steam line that was left open the day before. A rush of cold air in the steam line created a bubble that pushed up heated sludge onto the worker, causing fatal burns. A second worker suffered second-degree burns across their upper body. Before OSHA concluded the investigation, the agency learned that 25 days after the fatal incident, another employee inspecting a leaking gasket under a tank full of sodium hydroxide solution suffered chemical burns when the tank overflowed. The second incident remains under investigation. Our investigation found that Chemical Product Corporation's failure to make employee safety a priority allowed conditions that cost a worker his life, said OSHA Area Office Director Jeffrey Stawawi in Atlanta West. 2 serious incidents just weeks apart show that the culture at Chemical Products Corporation must change to emphasize worker safety and health. OSHA will continue to monitor and hold the company accountable until there are changes. OSHA cited the company for 5 serious violations after finding the company did the following. They failed to establish energy control procedures, creating thermal and chemical hazards. They failed to periodically inspect the energy control procedures, at least annually, while employees were tasked with applying lockout-tagout devices. They allowed slip and trip hazards to exist by failing to keep mid-tier catwalks free of corrosion. And they exposed employees to entrapment hazards by not clearly marking routes to emergency exits, and they failed to provide readily accessible safety data sheets for hazardous chemicals in the facility. So OSHA has proposed about $55,000 in penalties, an amount set by federal statute. Operating for 90 years, Chemical Products is an inorganic chemical manufacturer that employs about 136 workers. And the company has 15 business days from receipt of their citations and penalties to comply, request an informal conference with OSHA, or contest the findings. So there we go, folks. Always, that's a segment that should always make you mad. It's really, it's really insane.
A lot of deadly stuff on there.
Yeah, it's really insane how much bosses can get away with. But that is going to be it for us today. We've got a couple of plugs before we wrap up. As they do each month, our friends at Labor Notes are hosting a series of online trainings. If you're looking about how to get involved in your union or in activism in general, definitely check these out. This month, they have Caucus Development Getting Started. That starts on December the 7th. That's, if you're in a union, you feel like you want it to improve and you want to start a reform caucus, how can you get that started? Well, that's a training to do that. Caucus Development Getting Started on December the 7th. They also have What to Do When Your Union Breaks Your Heart on December the 5th. And later in the month, they have Stewards Training, Think Like an Organizer. So you can find out more info at labornotes.org/events. Adam is working with Alabama Arise to develop and host an advocacy training in January in the Huntsville area. Let him know if you're interested and have ideas. Adam may do an Alabama issue preview on Zoom the second week of December if there's enough interest. The Tennessee Valley Progressive Alliance is holding its next meeting on December the 5th at the main Huntsville Downtown Library Auditorium at 6 p.m. And there continue to be protests regarding the police killing of Steve Perkins in Decatur. And we've seen protests in Huntsville regarding the violence in Palestine and Congo. And there are groups meeting every month in the area, like North Alabama DSA and the Huntsville Citizens Climate Lobby, that are trying to make a difference. So if you're in the Tennessee Valley and want to get involved, definitely check those places out. And in every union and every labor council, there is always a need for more volunteers wherever you live. So one of the most important things you can do to grow working class power and build a better future is to get involved in your union and or labor council. If you don't have one, now's the time to be talking to your coworkers and assembling organizing committees. Check out our Unions 101 and 201 playlists on our YouTube channel if you'd like to learn more. And as always, feel free to reach out. And if you're in the area and would like to help grow the North Alabama Labor Council, please reach out. And if you're not on our email list at tvlr.fm, definitely sign up for that to stay up to date on what we're doing, and you will get Last Week in Southern Labor and Boss Watch in your inbox every single week on Mondays and Tuesdays. So definitely check that out, tvlr.fm/contact to get on those newsletters. That's going to be it for us today. We have a great overtime lined up for you today. We're going to be breaking down the UAW's announcement that they have signed on to the call for a ceasefire in Gaza. We're also going to be talking about contract alignments, a goal that the UAW has set for 2028, and how Minnesota unions are already doing that. We're going to be talking to some reporters about that. We're also going to be breaking down Elon Musk's dumb interview and looking at a U.S. House hearing on the new overtime rule. And if we have time, we're going to take a look at a new, more perfect union video about the defense industry and jobs, and whether or not it's actually a good investment. And the thing there is spoiler alert is that it's not a good investment. Defense industry, a lot of better things that you can spend your money on. So that's going to be it for us today, folks. Find us on Facebook and YouTube to listen to Overtime, or subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. And otherwise, we'll see you next week. All power to the workers. Okay. All right. We're off the radio now. Off of the radio. Appreciate everybody staying with us. Like I said, we got a great overtime lined up. We're going to be right back with that.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Welcome back. You're still listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morris, and Ben Job is filling in for Adam. We appreciate his sacrifice.
It's not that bad. This is fun.
Yeah. Good deal. Glad it's not too bad.
No.
But yeah, we've got a great overtime lined up for you. Really excited about it. And actually, I said we're going to start off with the breaking down stuff about the ceasefire. But actually, I think that it might be helpful to talk about the ceasefire with having had the conversation about the defense industry and jobs first. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about, because More Perfect Union recently put out an excellent video about the defense industry and jobs. And so I want to talk about that. And you know, we've had on this show some controversial opinions about war before, and those controversial opinions are that it's bad. That's very
extreme, very extreme.
Really radical. Killing people, children, innocent civilians, destroying country, that's bad. So, you know, sue me, okay? But that's kind of my perspective. But aside from, you know, the moral question, you know, is it good to murder children? You know, okay, well, that's just too difficult to kind of think about. You know, that's a very complicated question. Another way to think about it is, or at least, you know, an additional frame to think about it is what More Perfect Union did last week. It was an excellent episode of The Classroom. That's a regular series that they do on YouTube. And this one is about the claim that defense spending is good for the economy, right? And that's actually, you know, amazingly, you know, that is one of the big things that that will be the rebuttal. You know, you say, war is bad. It's bad for working people to murder each other. It's senseless. We shouldn't do it. War is bad. The the enlightened, kind of centrist, intelligent person says it's good for jobs. It
makes all this money.
Makes a lot of money for working people. Creates good paying union jobs. And that's why we have to murder brown people overseas, because so that we can have good union jobs, right? And so, you know, I don't personally find that very persuasive, but even on its own logic, it falls. But they compiled a lot of clips from the last few weeks of politicians telling us this, making this argument. War is good not because it's morally a good thing, right, to go around the globe killing people, but because it creates jobs. Let's play this clip.
All right.
Politicians from both parties are trying to convince us that foreign wars are good for improving America's working class.
I'm going to send to Congress an urgent budget request to support our critical partners, including Israel and Ukraine.
The supplemental the president put forward invests to ensure our military readiness and create American jobs.
The overwhelming majority has, in fact, gone to supporting American jobs.
American manufacturing, American jobs.
This supplemental does build up that industrial base.
This money is going to create jobs for Americans.
Equipment that defends America and is made in America.
This isn't a new strategy. For more than 80 years, politicians and the corporate elite have told us that war creates jobs and economic stimulus for all of us.
So there we go. Creates jobs and economic stimulus. And, you know, look, there's a reason that argument started, because it did used to have more, it used to have more legs to it, right? And specifically, you know, the kind of quintessential war is good for the economy. We think about World War II. And it's also, you know, World War II is also kind of a helpful place to peg why our military, why we should spend so much money on the military, because World War II was probably like the first war since, you know, I don't know, probably one of a literal handful, like you could count on one hand probably the number of times that America has militarily intervened and it been morally righteous. And, World War II is one of those few times. And so it's kind of a helpful thing, a helpful propaganda piece for people to use, because it was one of the few morally righteous wars. And it was also very good for the economy. It created 20 million jobs. It increased wages. Union membership increased. And it created greater equality for women and minorities. And in fact, one of the things like that, if you're talking about the economy generally, you'll say unions are responsible for the Great Compression, the decrease in inequality, an increase in the standard of living. There's pensions, time off, that's because of unions. Well, one of the rebuttals to that I've actually heard, in conversations and debates with conservatives, is that no. That's not the case, actually. The reason for that, and the economic boom in the 50s and 60s and 40s, was World War II defense spending, and that there was no European economy for our manufacturing industry to compete with. That's the reason. It was because of World War II defense spending. Unions had nothing to do with it. So if you believe that, then what Joe Biden, Mitch McConnell, and all these other warmongers in D.C. are saying right now, and have said for the last 20, 30, 50 years, it might make sense. But it's not the reason that World War II was good for the economy is not just because the spigot was turned on for the defense industry, right? Listen to More Perfect Union explain some of the constraints on the spending that ensured that this money did create a good economy.
And that's because President Franklin Delano Roosevelt actually pushed back against the big businesses that were building war supplies. Before World War II, there was no dedicated defense industry. So everyday industry like car makers pivoted to war supplies. FDR made it mandatory for those contractors to follow labor protection laws and respect unions, and he enforced it. Ford Motors won a contract to make military trucks, but refused the labor protections. So FDR canceled the contract. Labor historians say this led to Ford's historic unionization just months later. FDR even threatened to seize patents for big industries that weren't helping what was perceived as the national interest. There were protections in place to prevent rampant profiteering. Then, after the war, the GI Bill gave returning troops economic opportunities like college tuition and home loans. That combination of regulation and smart social spending led to good economic times for America's middle class.
So, there we go. It's not just because the spigot was turned on for the military-industrial complex. The reason that World War II defense spending was beneficial for working people is because the federal government had a really, comparatively radical approach to labor relations. They canceled a contract during the war, right? I mean, could you imagine today, as we are trying to ship all of this stuff overseas to Ukraine and to Israel, Joe Biden canceling a contract for missiles with Boeing or something because of their labor policies, right? I mean, for one, I can't even imagine that. It's unfathomable to me that Joe Biden would do that. But then if he did that, the reaction across the media, across all of the parties, is completely predictable. And that reaction is, he is a radical peacenik. He is trying to use this spending for his social engineering agenda. This is, anti-American. It's bad and all of this stuff. But that's how World War II defense spending was beneficial for working people, is because the government had standards and it held the companies to those standards. And so, if that's the arrangement that we had today, then maybe the economy argument would hold up on its own. And, that's not to say that even if it was true, that would be a sufficient cause for war. The war needs to be just and righteous for us to justify, right? Going across the seas and killing people, you know? So even if the economy argument was true, you know, the job is not done for war hawks. They still have to justify it morally. But it doesn't even stand on its own merits, because listen to this, where More Perfect Union explains the military-industrial economy today.
Look, obviously people need jobs, and defense manufacturing jobs are seen as valuable and important in key areas around the country. But let's be honest about this. Job creation is a mere afterthought. Pennies that the defense industry drops while walking away with a giant bag of loot. Let's dig in on this. Is building weapon systems actually the most effective way to create jobs and build an economy for everyone? Research at the Watson Institute of Brown University found that over the past 2 decades, the Department of Defense takes an average of $260 billion a year out of the national budget. They calculated what could have been done with that budget, jobs-wise. Spending that same amount on clean energy or healthcare would have created 50% more jobs, and education spending would have doubled the amount of new jobs. Today,
Let's
all
pause
of
that for a second.
Yeah.
That is crazy, right? I mean, just think about that, right? We've got all these defense jobs because we spend hundreds of billions of dollars on the defense industry. And we could create literally twice the jobs if we spent the same amount of money on education. We could create 50% more jobs if we spent it on healthcare and clean energy. And, right, those jobs are additive themselves to the economy. You know, I mean, it makes sense. If you're a healthcare worker and you save somebody's life, well, you have that, you know, you've gotten those wages, right? And so that's additive for your life. But then also you go, you know, the person that you saved their life, they go around and they continue to be a productive member of society, and they continue to produce and you know, create value, right? In an education context, you know, again, you're also getting that income that's valuable for you, but you are creating a new cohort of educated citizens that will be more productive when they graduate. That is additive. The defense jobs are simply not additive. They are literally subtractive by their nature definitionally. When you create a bomb, its job is not to be additive for the economy. Its job is to destroy, right? So think about how much more valuable if we just spent the same amount of money on education, healthcare, or clean energy.
Theory is being confirmed by economic reality. The billions we've spent in Ukraine simply aren't creating new jobs. You can even track how money going directly to specific contractors doesn't create jobs. Reporting from Common Dreams found that from 2012 to 2018, Lockheed Martin's share of the American tax dollar increased by $13 billion. But in the same time, they cut more than 16,000 jobs. The situation was similar at Boeing and Raytheon. The only companies that added jobs only did so because they sucked up smaller companies and technically added their employees to their payroll.
Yeah, pause
and
there
defense
for just
companies
a
also
second.
don't care about the union.
That is crazy. These defense companies continue to take more of our money while universally cutting jobs. They're taking more money and cutting jobs. That is not good for the economy. Okay, let's see.
Taylor Barnes at Inkstick Media reported that arms companies are constantly moving their plants to states with right-to-work laws and other weak labor protections. Big union wins from World War II aren't sticking around. Lockheed had 69% unionization in 1971 and 19% in 2022. Only 4% of Northrop Grumman workers are unionized. And the jobs aren't even staying in America. One labor leader claimed a Lockheed union negotiator said to him, "We are actively looking for ways to outsource your job." Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense Justin McFarland recently told a conference of military contractors that the DoD would support flexible acquisition, which means moving some manufacturing to allies and partners. And the defense companies work real hard to keep it this way. In 2022, when then Representative Mondaire Jones introduced an amendment that would ban companies with NLRB or FLSA labor violations from getting defense contracts, the industry came out swinging to destroy it. They won and bragged about it. They'd keep their flow of government cash coming with no responsibility to respect workers' rights. And they can get away with it because of the monopoly they hold, which they also use to rip off the government and the taxpayer.
That's how FDR helped workers, right? The amendment for Mondaire Jones to ban contracts to employers with NLRA violations. That's the same way that FDR created an actually beneficial war economy for the American working class. And the defense industry is explicitly against it, uniformly. Not good for the economy, not good for working people. And also in this video, they talk about how research and development is down over this same time period. As these companies are getting more and more money, the amount of that money that they spend is going down. Money to shareholders is going up. Money to shareholders just since 2010, right? It's not, it's only 13 years ago. Money to shareholders is up 73%. And that's, look, that's when they're being honest, because Lockheed Martin has been charged with overcharging the federal government by hundreds of millions of dollars. The F-35 is a $1 trillion piece of trash, right? You can find any story you want. Yeah, there's stories all over the internet about how the F-35 has been a gigantic boondoggle, and we continue to shovel good money after bad on this project. Tens of billions of dollars in waste, fraud, and abuse. So there we go. The argument that war is good for the economy, war is good for American working people, it is not true. Does not stand on its own. So there you go. We're going to talk about the UAW coming out for a ceasefire here in a moment. But right now, we have on Isabella and Amy, right?
Yes, indeed, we do have them on.
Fantastic. So I am really excited about this. I found this article a long time after it came out. It's like how old is this? Let me pull up the article, actually. It's October 31st. So it is, okay, I'm only a month behind. I was thinking it had been longer than that. But it's a really great article. What could we win together? Labor in Minnesota gears up for a major escalation. And it's an article about how labor unions in Minnesota have already been on the ball about aligning contract expirations so that they all expire at the same time, and theoretically they could all strike at the same time. This is the call that UAW President Shawn Fain has put out to the entire labor movement, and unions in Minnesota have already started doing that. And so Isabella Escalona and Amy Stagger they've written an article about that, and really excited to talk to them about it. Amy, Isabella, welcome to the program. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Really looking forward to the conversation, and really appreciate your work on this. This is, like I said, a really great article. It's in these times. Folks should check it out. But just start us off with kind of the top line. There's a bunch of contracts expiring over the next year. What are they?
I can start us off. So in Minnesota, there is a pretty thriving labor movement. There's a lot of unions and worker centers, renters groups, and over the last decade or so, they've been coordinating their efforts to have a shared general kind of expiration timeline. So we're seeing in the next few months, or maybe they've already some of them have already expired. For example, the SEIU Local 26 has 4,000 commercial janitorial workers. expiring at the very end of the year. There's another 1,000 airport workers, 500 retail janitorial workers, both in the end of January. And then there's also 2,500 security workers at the end of February. Along with that, we have Metro Transit, bus drivers and bus operators, train operators. They had a contract expiring in the summer and are currently negotiating and authorized a strike a few months ago. And then Amy could speak to this a bit more, but we also have the MFT and SPFE, which are the two teachers unions who also have upcoming expirations.
Do you know what the total number of workers under these contracts that have been aligned are?
Yeah, we've been told that it's around kind of a range of like 20,000 to 30,000. There are a lot of public school teachers that in Minneapolis who went on strike, but in addition to the Minneapolis public school teachers, the St. Paul public school teachers are also their contracts also expired earlier this year around June. And they're still operating under the PELRA Public Employment Labor Relations Act, but they're currently negotiating as well. 20,000, 30,000, I think, is kind of a range of workers.
That's a pretty significant piece of the economy over there. How long has this been in the works? When did they start? When did all these unions start thinking about and working towards aligning all of these contract expirations so that they expire around the same time? And what got that started?
Yeah, I could jump in here. So we would say about a decade. It's hard to put an exact date on it, just because some of these have been like less, more informal collaborations. But previous to working as a reporter, I was working at a worker center in Minneapolis, and I've kind of been in this world for at least about like 4 or 5 years now, and every single year, these kind of groups of unions have either 1 or 2 weeks of action. So they're almost like mini versions of what's going on now, where they coordinate around maybe a shared target, or maybe a few different contract expirations, or maybe a different group is having a march. So they kind of share, May Day is one of the dates I'd seen that before happen. So every year there's almost like a mini collaboration build up to this moment. So I'd say a decade, but I would say almost every year there's been kind of building this muscle of shared solidarity and kind of shared political power analysis in Minnesota too.
Gotcha. And Amy, what is there a documented reason why they started trying to do this, trying to, build solidarity, between unions and then specifically the goal of aligning the contracts?
Yeah. So what's very evident, we can't trace it to like a certain document or point in time, but what's very evident is that there has been a power struggle in the state of Minnesota going on for ever. And currently, there's a lot of unrestrained corporate and private power that is influencing how Minnesotans live and work, powerful entities reaching their tentacles into every part of Minnesotans' lives, from kids' learning conditions at the schools to pollution of neighborhoods to abuse in the construction industry, and even lack of holiday pay and leisure time to enjoy time away from work. And so the unions and workers are very focused on, sort of educating the public on these powerful entities that are, increasingly unrestrained in their power and control over our lives.
And is there any like specific value to the coordinated contracts beyond, the obvious? More is better, right? That's the whole kind of idea behind unions. When we come together, we're more powerful in one workplace, and thus it makes sense to say that in a geographic region, when more unions come together, we're more powerful. But I'm wondering if there are like businesses or organization, in the supply chain where a strike by a different set of workers would still have an impact on them, or maybe, they have one owner? Are there any dynamics like that?
Oh yeah, definitely. One of the powerful groups discussed by unions and workers was the Minnesota Business Partnership, which consists of executives from over 100 companies and multinational conglomerates headquartered in the state. Minnesota has at least, I think, 15 Fortune 500 companies headquartered here. And 4 of the companies that were mentioned were General Mills, which is a consistent leader within the Minnesota Business Partnership and raises money for schools with its Box Tops for Education program while lending financial support to charter schools. So we can see how, private power is influencing against public education. And then another company that was mentioned was Ameriprise Financial, a wealth management company headquartered in downtown Minneapolis that manages working people's savings for retirement through pension funds. And the rise in subcontracting in the 1980s eliminated pensions for many of the janitors who work cleaning the corporate offices there. Another company that was mentioned was US Bank, which is a longtime partner of Dominium, which is a housing developer and opponent of rent stabilization, which has also been a fight here in the cities. And workers are also saying, too, that corporations should be paying their fair share of environmental impacts. They talked about 3M company, which has faced litigation for its role in disposing forever chemicals into the environments around here. And so, they're hoping that, collective action and solidarity with their community is, part of this broader strategy of, bargaining for the public good, not only to improve their members' working conditions, but to fight for a structural change within their communities.
Yeah, definitely. So this event that we went to back in October, where there were thousands of these union members all together in one space, really it was around 4 pillars. So better, livable, family-sustaining jobs, cleaner environment, truly affordable housing, and good schools. So something, some of these groups will see is, if you fight for one, very quickly you see it getting pit against each other. So one place you see this is in construction and housing development. So this is a new article that we just came out with at Workday Magazine, is that this idea that, if you want affordable housing, it's going to have to be on the backs of construction workers, and we're going to have to just underpay or not go union or have these, unfair labor practices or, sub-minimum wage, whatever the case may be. So by uniting these causes and at least having that shared analysis, there's, less room to pit these movements against each other. We also see that with the environment and worker protections. We see that with schools and jobs. When teachers go on strike, teachers are seen as, hurting the school or whatever the case may be. So really trying to get ahead of that and sort of make sure that these movements and these different fights aren't being pit against each other. And, a lot of these movements, I would say a lot of these different unions have specific ways that is impacting them.
Yeah. Can you talk about some of those specific ways with one or two of those groups of workers?
Yeah, I can talk about the teachers, some things that they are fighting for, pay increases, full service community schools, better mental health support, a commitment to strong schools and ending a decline in enrollment that they've seen. Teachers have also been organizing outside of that for green technology in their schools, solarization and electric buses. We know too that like a lot of times, the Minnesotans have been also experiencing the effects of climate change, including record snowfall, drought, poor air quality, and temperatures so high that, the Twin Cities Marathon has to be canceled. We deal with a lot of snow days here in Minnesota, but when it's too hot, kids and teachers and all sorts of school workers can't, work in their ideal conditions, and so it's unsafe for them there. So that's something that teachers have been fighting for as well.
Right. Have you been able to talk to any of these folks in Minnesota about the UAW's call for contract alignments? Are they how do they feel about his announcement, and do you know if they are trying to if they're going to try to align their contracts with that May 1st, 2028. How have they reacted, and are they going to try to follow that? Isabella?
Question. I don't think at least I haven't personally spoken to any of these workers since that announcement. I will say that this event happened in early October. So in a way, Minnesota was a little bit ahead of the game in that strategy. I will also say too, being in the Minnesota labor movement, I kind of assumed everybody was already doing this. And when I spoke to other organizers outside of the state, I was like, oh, I thought like this was what all the states were doing. And, there are little hubs of cities or certain areas where there is this alignment. But I will just say I was really surprised that this wasn't, a just tactic everybody had been taking. So, I can't speak to that exact date that the UAW put out, but I do think that Minnesota's kind of already has that strategy in the works.
Well, that's great. I'm really excited to hear that, and it is. And some of the analysis around his call to action, so to speak, for May the 1st, 2028, has talked about how, for a lot of unions, not only does it seem difficult for them to align their contract expiration with other unions, but even within their unions, it's and like you said, that's kind of I have been really, kind of flummoxed by some of the random assortments of contract expirations that some unions have allowed themselves to be put into. And I'm thinking specifically right now about the paper mills. I don't know if y'all have very many paper mills up in Minnesota, but the United Steelworkers represents a lot of paper mill workers, and they have at the big companies like WestRock or International Paper, they have national master agreements, and that expire at one time. But the national master agreement isn't the one with the no strike clause. It's the local agreements with the no strike clause. And the local agreements all expire. Like there's no coordination among the local agreements. It's all, evenly spaced out over the 4-year term of the contract. It's crazy. And I don't know if y'all have any reaction to that other than like, yeah, that is crazy. But it's been really frustrating to me talking to a lot of paper industry workers and feeling their frustration about especially seeing how Teamsters and the UAW have been able to leverage their leverage what they have in their industries, and it being so much more difficult in the paper industry. I mean, that really speaks to the value of this goal of contract alignment.
Totally. I think, just kind of a general reaction to that is I think that's intentional, making sure that these contracts are not aligned is, in part intentional. I mean, I can't speak to all the intricacies of labor law, but, that you also can't, strike on behalf of someone else. You can't have secondary strikes. So that in a way, plays into like, oh, you guys, can't align. Well, that's not true. You can align in some ways. Of course, being mindful of those kind of legal parameters, especially if we're talking, traditional unions. But, there's a lot of ways that things are divided. Also, something we didn't explicitly say either, but another kind of contingent here is worker centers. So worker centers aren't under the same kind of legal restrictions or, bargaining and expiration dates. But something we are seeing in the Twin Cities right now is, non-union construction workers who are organizing with worker centers, or rideshare drivers. These are also other groups who have historically not been union, have been sort of excluded from traditional bargaining. But instead, by organizing in these other forms, they're also able to kind of take advantage of this shared expiration date to do other types of actions to align their, either like events or calls for legislation or protests, whatever it may be, with this kind of early spring timeline that a lot of the unions are, because, unions and non-union workers also have been, historically pit against each other. So I would also wanted to just make sure we spoke to that, part of it too, is that worker centers and not traditionally organized labor is also a part of this.
Right. Well, Amy, Isabella, I really appreciate your time and the work that you're doing for Workday Magazine. Workday Magazine is a really cool thing that y'all have over there. I've talked to Sarah about it, and I'm incredibly jealous of what y'all have over there. Could you, I guess, make a pitch for Workday Magazine? What is it that y'all do over there, and what kind of stuff can people find?
Yeah, so Workday Magazine is, we're based in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, but we've recently, within the past year, expanded our coverage towards the broader Midwest and even national and international issues. We've written about, the intersections of the labor movement when it comes to climate and militarism. Our editor, Sarah Lazar, has been a very important part of this transition, and I love getting to work with her and Isa as well. They both bring such a wealth of knowledge and experience to what's going on in the labor movement right now, and always surprise me with how ahead of the game they are. So,
yeah. Well, Amy, Isabella, appreciate your time. Is there anything else that you want to make sure you leave folks with before we let you go?
Yeah, I just want to, shout out to the workers and unions who are celebrating and building off the momentum of the past year's wins in Minnesota, which include a lot of legislative wins, like the establishment of a nursing home workforce standards board here, driver's licenses for all, free breakfast and lunch for students across the states. It's been a very, very wonderful thing to observe and experience and kind of get like a front row seat to see. So we're very excited to be on top of this story, and hopefully more and more people will read about it and learn from them.
Yeah, I'll just add that Minnesota's a state to watch. I think that seeing that, a lot of Minnesota unions have been kind of aligning and strategizing in this really, exciting and unique way. Minnesota's a place to watch. So just hopefully follow our coverage of this as it progresses in early 2024.
All right, will do. Y'all have a good one. Thanks for your time. All right, folks. Isabella Escalona, Amy Stagger. Definitely check out their work in that was dual published by Workday Magazine and In These Times, so definitely check it out. They do good stuff. I think we got the sound issue figured out, so good deal. So let's talk about this ceasefire stuff with the UAW. This is a really, really big deal. The UAW International Union has become the latest and largest union to call for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. And this is really, I think, kind of representative of a sea change in the labor movement, because unfortunately the labor movement has really been, on the side of Israeli militarism against Palestinian and against the cause of freedom and justice for Palestinians, and it's been kind of a black mark on our movement for a while, and I think the tide is starting to turn. And so here is the specific, like the words of the resolution that they signed on to, that was began by UE, the United Electrical Workers Union. We, members of the American labor movement, mourn the loss of life in Israel and Palestine. We express our solidarity with all workers and our common desire for peace in Palestine and Israel. And we call on President Joe Biden and Congress to push for an immediate ceasefire and an end to the siege of Gaza. We cannot bomb our way to peace. We also condemn any hate crimes against Muslims, Jews, or anyone else. In issuing this call, U.S. unions are joining the efforts of 13 Congress members and others who are calling for an immediate ceasefire. The basic rights of people must be restored. Water, fuel, food, and other humanitarian aid must be allowed into Gaza. Power must be restored, and foreign nationals and Palestinians requiring medical care must be allowed out of Gaza. The Israeli hostages taken by Hamas must be immediately released. Both Hamas and Israel must adhere to standards of international law and Geneva Convention rules of warfare concerning the welfare and security of civilians. There must be a ceasefire in Gaza. The cycle of violence must stop so that negotiations for an enduring peace can proceed. The U.S. must act. We call on President Biden to immediately call for a ceasefire. The road to justice cannot be paved by bombs and war. The road to peace cannot be found through warfare. We commit ourselves to work in solidarity with the Palestinian and Israeli peoples to achieve peace and justice. Union members come from diverse backgrounds, including Jews, Muslims, and Middle Eastern communities. The rising escalation of war and arms sales doesn't serve the interests of workers anywhere. In the end, we all want a place to call home and for our children to be safe. Working people around the world want and deserve to live free from the effects of violence, war, and militarization. Thousands of Americans have joined the groundswell of global solidarity demanding a ceasefire now. It's the labor movement's turn to make our voices heard and demand a ceasefire. Together, we can stand for peace, justice, and a better future for working people everywhere. Please sign this call and add your name to a growing list calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. So a very important statement, and very important that the UAW has signed on. I think it's the right thing to do morally, and I think it makes sense politically. They announced it at a news conference with other union members and activists in D.C. just yesterday on Friday. And Cynthia Nixon was there, a 45-year member of SAG-AFTRA, former gubernatorial candidate in New York State. She spoke at the press conference on Friday and says that unions are about solidarity. Unions are about groups of people with less power and less rights coming together to challenge a more powerful, wealthier, more connected entity. About the little guy standing up to the big guy and demanding justice, fairness, and humane treatment. And that is certainly what we are seeing the Palestinian people do as they implore the bombing to stop. So there was also a recent piece in Jewish Currents by Jeff Shirky from In These Times, but he wrote this for Jewish Currents, the problem of the unionized war machine. And there was a lot of really, really good stuff about how, much like with climate change, and the issue of having so many union members in fossil fuel industries, that presents an impediment to transition. And so, we have to figure out a way to reconcile these differences because it is necessity to move away from fossil fuels. And so we have to figure out how to speak to the concerns, the valid concerns of people in fossil fuel industries and the way that has been, put forward for decades. I think the person who coined the term just transition was the president of the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers Union. Oh, shoot. What was his name? The man who, this is his biography, the man who hated work and loved labor. Let's see if I can find his name. Tony Mazzocchi. That's right. It was on the tip of my tongue. Tony Mazzocchi. I think he was the one that coined the term just transition. And basically, it sounds a lot like what it is what it sounds like. It is a transition from a fossil fuel economy, from fossil fuel jobs to clean energy jobs, but it is just because we have seen so many transitions, especially over the course of the last 50 years, that have not been just. Deindustrialization, the outsourcing of American jobs, the absolute destruction of our manufacturing communities. It has not been just because these people who have had these jobs have gone from being solidly middle class, being able to work and make a living, oftentimes only on one income, to now not having that job and having to work a much lower paying job, sometimes in the same industry for about half as much, working at a non-union manufacturing facility, or working in a not manufacturing industry, having to work in the service industry where you make even less than half what you used to make, right? If you used to make $40, $50, $35 an hour at a union manufacturing job, and now you're making $15 an hour sometimes working in a restaurant, if that, right? This is an incredibly, that is the example. And that is why so many in the fossil fuel industry are, reluctant when they hear these calls, reasonably so. They're reluctant to go along with, this clean energy stuff because they've seen transitions in the past completely fuck them over, right? And so it's not unreasonable to say, well, why the hell would I trust you, government, industry, society, to transition me in a way that is just and fair and makes sense, right? And so you have to do a lot of work, and you have to actually do the just transition. You have to actually create good paying union jobs in the clean energy economy. And so the same problem exists in the war industry, right? Because I just talked about how the idea that the war industry creates good paying jobs is something of a, is to a certain extent not true, because so much of this money has gone to the top. 73% more is going to shareholders in the defense industry now than in 2010. Less money is being spent on research and development. And as all of these companies continue to get more and more and more money from the U.S. government, they are actually increasingly cutting American jobs. And so, the argument that spending more on the military is good for jobs in the American economy, we've talked about how that is not a persuasive argument, but that doesn't do anything for the unionized war machine workers who do have good jobs, because there are good paying union jobs in the war machine, right? And that is a reality that we have to deal with. And so, in the same way that fossil fuel workers look at what has happened to auto workers and say, there's no way that I'm going to want to follow that. That's crazy. Why would I sign on to that? War machine workers are, not unreasonably so, saying, what could I do for a job if we stop spending so much money on defense? I have to have the war machine to feed my family. And that's morally, not really, that's not a great argument, but it is one that must be dealt with societally, practically, right? It doesn't matter how we think morally about that, right? The fact is the problem exists and we must do something about it if we are going to transition to a peace economy, to an economy that can and does thrive on peace, to a world where we don't have to, where people don't have to depend on their incomes on war and violence, and where people don't have to experience war and violence and militarization and all of this kind of stuff, right? So we have to have a just transition for the workers in the military-industrial complex. And this has been, just like the fossil fuel industry, this has been something that workers, that union leaders have been thinking about for a long time. And it's not to say that it's been a popular, the idea of a just transition to a peace economy has not been the mainstream position in the labor movement, unfortunately. But it has had high-level adherence. And so one of those adherents was Walter Reuther. And Jeff Shirky talks about this in Jewish Currents. So I'm reading from this article, The Problem of the Unionized War Machine by Jeff Shirky in Jewish Currents. Recognizing that speedily ending the fighting in Southeast Asia, the Vietnam War, would have economic ramifications within the U.S., Reuther argued in 1969 that the weapons contractors, who then employed 3.8 million workers, tens of thousands of whom were UAW members, should be required to avert layoffs by converting their operations to civilian production. The anvil on which peace is hammered out, he said, should not be on the heads and backs of displaced defense workers and their families. And that's such a great quote. And it can't be if we're going to actually do this, because we need their support. We need the support of the labor movement, and the support of the labor movement is going to largely depend on convincing these people who work in these industries that this needs to happen. So the anvil on which peace is hammered out should not be on the heads and backs of displaced workers and their families. So to make this possible, Reuther called on Congress to pass legislation requiring weapons manufacturers to put 25% of their after-tax profits into a federally managed conversion fund, which would be used to pay for retraining and family benefits for workers during a period of economic adjustment. The idea was, in many ways, a precursor to later calls from unionists and fossil fuel-related industries for a just transition to green energy jobs. Another popular and powerful labor leader was William Wimpesinger, who was at one point the international president of the general president of the International Association of Machinists. He was one of the most left-wing and anti-war labor leaders of the Cold War era, interestingly enough, because the Machinists Union represents more workers in the defense industry than any other union in the country. So as an official in the Machinists Union, the union representing the largest number of weapons industry workers in the U.S., Wimpesinger took a principled stance in favor of conversion, saying that he, quote, would hate to think that the members of our union, who are now engaged in the many facets of military production, would have to depend forever on world terror in order to survive as an economic unit. After becoming the Machinists Union president in 1977, Wimpesinger put his principles in action by ending the union's cooperation with weapons industry lobbyists trying to push arms deals through Congress. Unless and until, he said, our country breaks the vicious cycle that seems to chain us to a wartime economy, we are forever going to be prisoners of defense appropriations bills in Congress. In 1978, Wimpesinger went further, vocally, though unsuccessfully, opposing a U.S. plan to sell F-15 fighter jets to Israel, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, even though the planes were to be produced by Machinists Union members at a Pratt & Whitney factory in Connecticut. I mean, that's a very difficult thing for a labor leader to do, right? After reading this article, I'm going to have to read more about Wimpesinger, because he sounds like a very, very interesting figure, a very good guy. So this is him being quoted again. The obvious result of the sales would be to heighten tensions in the region. We need peace, not profits. Such anti-war advocacy often ran into resistance from skeptical Machinists Union members and staff, but Wimpesinger was resolute. Quote, sometimes self-interest has to take a backseat to what's right, especially if the choice is between a layoff and a death. So I think very powerful argument from Wimpesinger and very practical solutions presented by both Walter Reuther and William Wimpesinger, the UAW and Machinist Unions presidents, respectively, during the 60s and 70s.
Well, Jacob, they have the same kind of argument about transitioning from fossil fuels to like green energy, where it's like you're going to destroy all these jobs, but with green energy, you need infrastructure. If you're going to build nuclear plants, you need thousands of hectares of concrete. You need people to maintain this stuff. It's not like changing industries means you'll even have a net loss in jobs in the long run. Things like the New Deal and with building some of the infrastructure we still use around here. I mean, that was incredible amounts of jobs were created for that.
Yeah. And the thing is to make them good jobs, right? Because, and there was just recently a report from Alabama Arise about the auto industry in Alabama and how it has fallen short of a lot of the promises that the auto industry made to the government of Alabama as we shovel hundreds of millions of dollars into their pockets. And that's the reason that people are skeptical of any sort of transition, is because we have seen these transitions to bad paying, bottom of the, low road, bottom of the barrel jobs with low wages, bad working conditions, unsafe working conditions, disrespect on the job, tyrannical corporations. And so we have to make them good paying jobs. We have to make them union jobs, and we have to have the government do like it did during World War II and hold these companies to account and to certain standards, labor standards, and all of this kind of stuff to do an actual just transition in both for both the defense industry and the fossil fuel industry. So anyway, that's a incredibly consequential move from the UAW to endorse a ceasefire in Gaza. Very appreciated, and looking forward to continuing to watch these developments. Okay, so here's another thing that happened last week. Walter Reuther in the chat says, thanks for the shout out. So here's another thing that's happened last week. Elon Musk was interviewed, and, he talked, there's, it's just so, I don't know. Let's start off and this is how the interview started off too, actually.
That's also how I feel about Elon Musk, by the way.
Yeah, right. That's the appropriate way to feel about Elon Musk. But the interview started off, really by illustrating the superiority of our betters, how much smarter and more intelligent and brilliant they are, and really, just underlining why working people cannot be trusted to run the economy. We cannot be trusted to run our lives. We have to have better people than us, economic royalists, if you will, to run our affairs for us. We have to have geniuses, right? We have to have geniuses to run our affairs for us, like Elon Musk. And that's why it is such a good thing that he has so much power as a single individual. He illustrated that when they started the interview.
And Jonathan, the only reason I'm here is because you are a friend. What was my speaking fee?
You're not making any. First of all, I'm Andrew, but
yeah, sorry,
it's okay. Second of all, we've known each other for a very long time.
I've spoken. Yes.
And
listen,
he's trying to grab it back too. Listen.
What I'm trying to illustrate is that sometimes I say the wrong thing. And Jonathan, the only reason I'm here is...
Okay, that's it.
Okay. Also illustrating that they have insane laughs, too. That's another thing that he illustrated. Yeah, so there you go. There are betters, obviously. They should be running society. They should have no checks on them, all of that. They talked a lot about stuff, said a lot of really silly things, pontificating about the meaning of life, digital God, all this kind of stuff, and really smelling his own fart in a lot of this conversation that other people have talked about endlessly. I think the big moment was the go F yourself moment. That's what a lot of people, hung on to, which is another
classic system for getting more advertisers.
Yeah, super. Yeah,
antagonize them in the press.
Yeah, just continuing to illustrate how much better Elon Musk is at running the affairs of working people than working people would be by telling the people who make the operation of the company that he runs possible to go F themselves. So, just a really intelligent guy, and it's great that he has so much power and that his words mean so much. But people have already talked about that. I don't really have anything else to say about that other than what's been said, and what's been said better than I could say it. But not very many people, kind of surprisingly, have reacted or analyzed or commented on another part of this interview where he talked about how he felt about unions, and it was very revealing. So let's play this clip.
How worried are you that the unionization effort that just took place I shouldn't say effort, but the new wages and the like at GM and Ford that they're coming for you? And they are coming for you. What is that going to mean to you and your business?
Well, I think it's generally not good to have an adversarial relationship between people on the line, one group at the company and another group. In fact, I disagree with the idea of unions, but perhaps for a reason that is different than people may expect, which is I just don't like anything which creates kind of a lords and peasants sort of thing. And I think the unions naturally try to create negativity in a company and create a sort of lords and peasants situation. There are many people at Tesla who have gone from working on the line to being in senior management. There is no lords and peasants. Everyone eats at the same table. Everyone parks in the same parking lot. At GM, there's a special elevator only for senior executives.
Pause it.
We have no such thing at Tesla.
Hold on. Just there we go.
Okay, and we can rewind it so we don't miss anything. But this is so stupid. And look, people can really the ability for humans to deceive themselves is great, and that's been studied, and people are capable of convincing themselves that untrue things are true, right? And so maybe because his livelihood and influence and power and all of this and his ability to kind of sleep at night depends on what he's saying being true, maybe he believes it, but it's difficult for me to believe that it's not just a bald-faced lie, because when you think about lords and peasants, what is the dynamic between lords and peasants that makes it objectionable? Right? Just think about that for a second. Okay, lords and peasants, that's bad, has a bad connotation. Why is it that it has a bad connotation? What is it about the relationship between feudal lords and serfs, their peasants, that makes it objectionable to 21st century freedom-loving Americans? The dynamic that makes it objectionable is the amount of power, of indisputable, unquestionable, unchallengeable power that lords have over peasants. The ability of lords to dictate anything within their realm that they want. It is up to them, and totally up to them, whether and how much you will have land. It is up to them, and totally up to them, whether or which crop you will be able to grow. Up to them whether you can have anybody else living with you. Whether you can, everything within their realm on their property is totally within their control, and there is nothing the serfs can say about it. They have to either acquiesce to the demands of the Lord or flee the land and run away. So I hope you can understand where I'm going with this, because that is the dynamic that exists in non-union shops, right? At Tesla, at Nissan, at Subaru, Toyota, Honda, Mazda, Hyundai, Mercedes-Benz, Volvo, all of these places, the dynamic is that these companies have total and complete dictatorial control over everything that happens within their realm of influence, within their factories. As a worker, when you clock in for your shift, you clock out of your rights and privileges and freedoms as an American citizen. You no longer have freedom of speech. You no longer have freedom of movement. You no longer have all of this kind of stuff. You are now literally a subject at the beck and whim of the company, without any recourse, without any negotiating power, none of that. It's completely, it is literally a serfs and peasant relationship. And that's the objectionable thing, is the power and the ability for the Lord to decide what happens to the serf. That is exactly almost the power that companies have over non-union workers. And so the way that union workplaces are actually much less lords and peasants dynamic.
You could say it's authoritarian or anti-democratic even.
Yes, the dynamic that exists in non-union plants. And so unions make these places more democratic, and they lessen the power that the lords have over the serfs, right? And then his example of, unions create a lords and peasants mentality, and then his first example of how unions do that is that GM has a special elevator for management. That's not in the contract. That's GM. That's not the union.
For only the union management? Like, what is that?
It's so stupid.
It's absurd.
What a stupid thing to say. It's not the union's fault that GM management wants their own special elevator, right? That's GM management's. Anyway, okay, let's continue.
All right, here we go. Step it back just a little.
Parks in the same parking lot. At GM, there's a special elevator only for senior executives. We have no such thing at Tesla.
All our elevators are normal elevators.
And the thing is that I actually know the people on the line because I worked on the line, and I walked the line, and I slept in the factory, and I worked beside them. So I'm no stranger to them. And there are actually many times where I've said, well, can't we just hold a union vote? But apparently a company is not allowed to hold a union vote. So it has to be somehow called for, but the unions can't do it. So I said, well, let's just hold a vote and see what happens. The actual problem is the opposite. It's not that people are trapped at Tesla building cars. The challenge is how do we retain great people to do the hard work of building cars when they have like 6 other opportunities that they can do that are easier. That's the actual difficulty, is that building cars is hard work, and there are much easier jobs. And I just want to say that I'm incredibly appreciative of those who build cars, and they know it. So there's I don't know, maybe there will be unionized. I say, like, if Tesla gets unionized, it will be because we deserve it and we failed in some way. But we certainly try hard to, ensure the prosperity of everyone.
Yeah, so there you go. And so, look, if you hear what Elon Musk says, he's like, I'd love to have a union vote. I have no problems with a union. And look, if they do it, then we've done something wrong. Hold a union vote today. I don't care. It's not, it's not no skin off my nose, but my employees just love me so much they don't want a union. Oh, wow. Right? That's what he says right now. And this is the thing about one of the things about these interviews that I hate. They drive me up the wall because he has a record on this that Andrew Ross Sorkin could have asked him about, and he didn't. This is all stuff that is very public record, and he knows about it. Andrew does, because he has followed Elon Musk and he's followed all of this, and there's no shot that he doesn't know about the union efforts at Tesla over the years and Tesla's reaction to them. And so, a journalist with an interest in the truth and challenging power and not, stroking his ego would ask him about the following. Let's play this.
And they told me that based on my previous performance, that I was not meeting expectation for, the current, I've been saying it so much now I can't, acceleration. Oh my god. Performance acceleration. I've been saying it so much and I just lost it. And I was really confused by that. I'm like, my last review was great. I mean, I got a promotion from a level 1 labeler to a level 2 labeler. I got a raise to go along with the new promotion, and I got another raise just for having a good performance. It's like the metric bonus or whatever. So I didn't understand it. And I was crying, and I'm just like, why? This doesn't make sense. I didn't even get a chance to clear off my own desk, and that's how they were doing it throughout the day. They would take an employee, and as soon as that employee was out of the room, they start clearing off the desk. My name was on the committee letter that went out on Tuesday, and Wednesday I lost my job.
I spoke to a lot of people across the plant. By the time they fired me, I had people ready and willing to walk out if we said to. And they fired me because I tried to improve the lives of my coworkers and myself. That's why they fired me, because it wasn't a part of Elon's plan.
So it is not as if working people have not tried to hold a union vote at Elon Musk's factories. He has, in every step of the way, been antagonistic towards and punishing of employees who engage in this. And in fact, that person that you just heard from, Richard Ortiz, he was fired in 2017 by Elon Musk for his union activities. The NLRB at the time held that this was illegal retaliation for his union activities, and it was actually only a few months ago upheld by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. I don't know how much you know about the appeals courts in the United States, but the Fifth Circuit is literally the single most conservative, Trump appointee-filled court in the country, the Fifth Circuit. It's off the rails. And that circuit, that appeals court upheld, Elon Musk's retaliation against Richard Ortiz was so obvious and so blatantly illegal that the court with the single highest percentage of Trump appointees in the country said so. That this is illegal. You have to hire Richard Ortiz again, and you have to pay him back wages. That is how blatant his illegal activity was. Additionally, around the same time period, he tweeted this out. He said, quote, "Nothing stopping Tesla team at our car plant from voting union. Could do so tomorrow if they wanted, but why pay union dues and give up stock options for nothing?" He was sanctioned by the NLRB again for that time, and a California judge agreed, saying in part that it can only be read by a reasonable employee to indicate that if employees vote to unionize, they would give up stock options. I mean, what is it that's creating the lords and peasants dynamic? It is this kind of without justification, without the need for justification or negotiation, the ability to take away stock options from people because they want a collective voice on the job, right? That is how he has reacted to union campaigns in the past. And in fact, right now, he has a case that the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals agreed with him on that is probably going to be taken up by the Supreme Court that could very well overturn nearly 100 years of Supreme Court precedent around the National Labor Relations Act. That being that workers have the federally protected right to engage in collective concerted activity, including the wearing of union merchandise on the job as a free speech protection and as a protection on the job that you get because that is a collective effort and that kind of thing should be protected. He not only banned employees from handing out materials that were not pre-approved by Tesla, he banned leafleting. That's also illegal. After employees began to wear shirts with union insignias to work, the company instituted a restrictive dress code that prohibited unapproved pants and shirts. And so this case, the Supreme Court, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals has said, yes, we are fine with overturning 100 years of Supreme Court precedent and saying that your boss should be able to dictate that you cannot wear union merchandise to work and show your support for a union at work. We agree that you should not have that freedom at work. Your boss should be able to take away that freedom from you at work whenever he wants if you don't have a union. And that is what Elon Musk is doing right now. And that's the kind of thing that Andrew should have asked him about. Okay, you're saying I would be fine if the UAW held a vote at my plants tomorrow. Well, why don't you let them wear UAW shirts on the line? Right? But that's not something that Andrew asked. And for the life of me, I don't understand it. It's incredibly frustrating. So there you go. That was Elon Musk's words on unions versus Elon Musk's record on unions, and they could not be more different. Okay.
Oh, yeah, and I'll go on record because a commenter. I was not saying Elon Musk is a genius. I was joking.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Right.
At the very idea.
Yeah. All right. Goodness gracious. Okay, so here's the last thing that we're going to talk about. This is the new Department of Labor rule about overtime exemptions. Okay, so the standard is that you have the right, and your employer must pay you over 40. It must pay you time and a half if you work over 40 hours in a week. Okay, that's kind of the standard. But then there are exemptions from that, and so one of those exemptions is the professional employee exemption. And it's basically that, look, if you have job duties that are kind of related to, you have all this, independent authority, you have a certain amount of independent authority to manage the administration of the business, and you're on salary, meaning you get the same amount of pay every 2 weeks, same amount of pay regardless of how many hours you work. Theoretically, whether you go above or below whether you go above or below this number that I'm about to tell you, whether you go above or below 40 hours in a work week, you get the same amount of money. But if you ever talk to anybody on salary, they'll tell you that they never work less than 40 hours a work week. It's always more than 40 hours in a work week. But that's not something that they'll tell you at the beginning of the job. And so that's one of the ways that they get away from overtime is they say, look, this is a special kind of employee and they're on salary, so we don't have to pay them overtime. And that's in the law. But one of the, another restriction on that exemption, one of the restrictions on that exemption is the salary must be right now over $35,568 a year. Right? So if you are an employee under $35,000 a year, you make less than that per year, you cannot be exempt from overtime laws. That's not legal. It doesn't matter what you do at your job. If you're employed and you make less than $35,000 a year, you're entitled to overtime and they must give it to you. But if you make over $35,568 in a year and you meet all of these job descriptions, then then you can be theoretically exempt from overtime. You don't have to be, right? I make, significantly more than $35,000 a year, but I'm an hourly employee. I get paid by the hour, so if I work over 40 hours in a work week, then I get overtime. If I work less than 40 hours in a work week and I don't take any accrued leave, then I don't get paid, right? I'm an hourly employee. Okay, so the Department of Labor is seeking to change that salary threshold from $35,000 a year to $55,068 a year. So they're dramatically increasing this salary threshold. And so once this rule goes into effect, then if you make under $55,000 in a year, no matter what your job duties are, you have to be paid overtime if you work 40 hours in a work week. You cannot be exempt. So, as you can imagine, a lot of business groups are really up in arms about this. And so there was a hearing on this in the United States House of Representatives, which is controlled by the Republicans. And they had a hearing about this and saying, oh, this is so scary. So scary. And so
my stocks are quaking.
Yeah.
My stock options.
And, the overtime rules are meant to discourage overtime. Like it's, in addition to giving the employees who work overtime a premium for their efforts, it's also meant to, part of it is meant to be a punishment to the employer, to the boss, right? Because you should not be, as an employer, routinely working your employees over 40 hours in a work week. So, you have to pay this penalty, right? And so that's one of the that's one of the reasons for these regulations is to punish employers. And one of the guests of the hearing for the Democrats explained why that's important by explaining the effects of overtime on employees.
And make no mistake about it, excessive overtime is dangerous for workers, leading to cardiovascular disease, stress, depression, increased alcohol and tobacco use, and mental health issues. It can also lead to increased absenteeism, low productivity, low morale, and higher turnover, all of which are significant costs to employers and make their workplaces less attractive to their current workforce for potential job candidates. And make no mistake.
So, there you go. And it's obvious, I think everybody has worked more than 40 hours in a work week at some point in their life, and you recognize that sucks ass, right? That is not fun. And so you can imagine if you're subjected to that week in and week out, that it's going to be detrimental to your health in a variety of ways. And so this is the group of workers that we're talking about in this hearing. The group of workers that works so much that they work over 40 hours in a work week. That's the only people implicated by this discussion, right? And so because that's the subject of this hearing, it is clear that Representative Virginia Foxx does not know where she is because this was her opening remarks.
Unfortunately, what Ms. Conti was talking about is there's just a lot of people in this country who don't want to work, period, and want somebody else to take care of them. And that's not what this country's all about. What we need, we have great opportunities in this country for people to be successful if they want to work hard.
That's absurd.
How stupid. Like we're in
don't want to work over 40 hours. Like,
yeah, what are we talking about?
Which room was she in?
We're not in a hearing about unemployment benefits. We're in a hearing about overtime.
They don't want to do 712s, Jacob, okay?
That means they're lazy. Yeah, it's insane.
Dang it, for under $55,000 a year.
So it's bonkers, in the context of the discussion that we're having, because the discussion is only relevant to people who work over 40 hours in a work week, okay? So, this is just a silly thing, but it's also a silly thing in general. People say this a lot, even though it's
a lot
totally nonsense, because look at this. Prime working age labor force participation rate. Okay? Google that. Google that. Okay? The prime working age is 25 to 54. Currently, the prime working age labor force participation rate is about 83.34 or 5%. 83 point something percent, give or take. That means that more than 8 in 10 people who are working age are in the formal economy, right? These are people that the government is tracking.
Over the board, yeah.
This is not, this is not like mothers taking care of their children. This is people who are getting a paycheck every week, 83 point something percent. There have only been, in the history of the country, like 6 years where more prime age working people are working. Only 6 years. In the entire history of the country, since 1776, there has only been like 6 years where we have had more prime working age people in the workforce. So this is just such a silly thing to go around saying because it is so unreflective of reality as to be absurd. And those 6 were like in the 90s or something, which is, historically not a great time. The 90s, right? How old is Virginia Fox? Let's Google that for a second.
We got to figure out where this brain came
Virginia Fox age. Let's see what okay, she's 80 years old. She was born in 1943. That means she was 25 in 1968. Okay, let's see what the prime working age labor force participation rate was in 1968. 71%. 71%, a full 11, 12 percentage points less than it is today.
Those lazy non-working.
And that's also part of the argument is that people don't want to work today. People don't want to work today. Today, people don't want to work as compared to, presumably, when I was prime working age, back in the 60s, when only 70% of prime working age people were in the workforce. It's just insane. It's so disconnected from reality that it makes, I go into a rage. I don't understand how people can say this because it's so unreflective of reality. Okay, so now, there were some other people who did not, just kind of walk out of the nursing home and where am I? I don't know what's going on, right? There were some people that knew where they were and that did make arguments. I did not find them persuasive, but let's listen to them. I'm nothing if not fair, and I'll hear people out, right? So let's listen to one of the first arguments from the Republican side of the aisle as to why this new rule would be bad.
First, the proposed rule rejects 85 years of Department of Labor practice and would transform the salary threshold into a completely unprecedented regulatory device. Since 1940, the department's regulations have consistently embodied the principle that the purpose of the salary threshold is to screen out obviously non-exempt employees. Weeding out those individuals avoids the department, employers, and workers wasting time analyzing job duties of employees whose pay is so low that there is little chance that they would satisfy the duties test for exemption. The department has repeatedly cautioned that the salary level must not be so high as to exclude a substantial number of workers. Yet the proposed rule acknowledges that it would deny exempt status to at least 3.4 million workers whose duties qualify for exemption today. And the department admits in a footnote that the real salary threshold it intends to put into the final rule is quite a bit higher than the already high level stated in the proposal. In short, the proposed threshold of more than $55,000 per year would, for the first time in the nearly century-long history of the FLSA, transform the salary threshold into an entirely new regulatory tool, one that operates to deny exempt status to millions of workers whose job duties qualify for exemption.
Wow. That's pretty crazy. This guy is claiming that the salary threshold would be so numerically high as to completely alter the name of the game, so to speak, right? It's creating a completely new regulatory burden, doing something that's never been done before because this new salary threshold is so high, right? This is totally, this is just brand new, never happened before. This is so, out of line with everything else that's come before it. So, you hear that first and you're thinking, okay, well, maybe I agree with the regulation, but that's something I want to think about, right? Is this such a big departure from historic trends? That's kind of it's something that we want to chew on for a little bit, right? And so one of the guests that the Democrats brought, they chewed on that, and here's their response to that argument.
By raising the salary threshold to $55,068 per year, DOL will provide new and enhanced protections for approximately 3.6 million people who are now working more than 40 hours per week for free. By historical standards, this is actually a rather modest threshold. In 1975, 63% of full-time salaried workers were covered by overtime protections, regardless of their duties. Today, that share is a mere 9%. Had the relevant 1974 salary threshold for the current duties test merely been updated for inflation, it would stand at nearly $68,000 per year.
I mean, this is any time you hear an anti-worker politician or think tank freak or employer say something that makes it sound like their arguments are reasonable, that maybe the workers are asking for too much, or maybe this, pro-worker thing is not actually so good. You just never believe it because it's always almost bullshit, right? I mean, can you imagine being so, having the gall to know, there's no way that he doesn't know that. There's no way that he does not know that the $55,000 threshold is actually historically modest. And he's out here making the claim that this is the opposite of that. It is historically immodest. It is making history because of how high it is. I mean, just a lie. Literally a lie, this guy. Okay, so first argument, not super persuasive because it's a lie. So, look, if you're not telling the truth, it's difficult to be persuaded. If someone knows the truth and you're not telling the truth, not going to be very persuasive. Okay, so here's another argument, and this argument comes from the employer, the owner of a bunch of hotels, right? And so this is, hotel industry is, extremely is known for nothing if not its good treatment of employees, right? And so I'm sure that she's gonna have a good argument. Let's listen to that.
I'm here today to explain my perspective as a small business owner and a hotel operator, and to describe how the Department of Labor's proposed changes to the overtime rule will have devastating effects on my business, my employees, and the lodging industry. It is critical to note that the proposal does not simply increase salaries for few employees at a marginal level. Rather, an up to 70% increase will drastically impact the entire business plan well beyond compensation. We expect not only a significant jump in direct staffing costs, but also substantial increases in associated labor costs, including payroll taxes, federal and state unemployment taxes, insurance, and none of which seems to be included in much of the discussion. In order to handle these increases, employers will be forced to take actions that we do not want to take, including actions that could set workers back in their careers. The last thing small business owner wants to do is to lay off their employees. Unfortunately, some hotels may be forced to do so because of this new rule in order to stay in business.
So if you feel like really slimy after listening to that, you're not alone. I did too. Because think about like the ramifications of what she's saying. If it's true, think about if it's just grant her the benefit of the doubt that it's true. Because in all actuality, probably also a lie, right? Because this is always the argument against anything that would benefit workers. Unions, minimum wage, safety regulations, all of this stuff going to kill jobs, going to shut down employers. And in fact, we saw exactly the opposite of that happen with the recent UAW contracts, where they have not only gotten all these raises and all this stuff for their members, but they have also gotten the companies to commit to reopen plants that had been idled and to build new plants in the future, right? So probably it's a lie what she's saying. But let's take it at face value and say she's not lying. What does that mean? If she's not lying, what she is telling us is that she utilizes so much overtime labor from people who make less than $26 an hour, which is about what the threshold is, right? $55,000 a year is about $26 an hour. She utilizes so much labor, over 40 hours in a work week, from people who make less than $26 an hour, that it could drastically affect her entire business plan and cause her hotels to close. That's bonkers, right? How could that even possibly be the case? Right? You can only possibly work somebody, 80 hours in a work week, 100 hours in a work. There's only so many hours in a week, right, that are even available. And then you got to sleep. You got to go home, right? It's just difficult to imagine that that's even possible, that could be the case. But if it is, think about what that means for the people she is exploiting, right?
It's a real lords and peasants kind of conundrum where they're like, if we pay these peasants who are already working 40 plus hours, which is what blows my mind about like all these arguments, like they're already working full time plus hours. It's like, we pay them too much. It's going to destroy America. It's going to wreck our economy.
It really is.
Brutal.
It really is wild. That's just wild. I mean, that's kind of a really like showing your ass moment if she's telling the truth. Because that,
we need to exploit harder, guys.
Yeah.
So we can't exploit less.
I mean, all that does is just kind of underscore her wickedness and, all that. Okay, so, look, that's an argument. Again, not convinced by it. Not very convincing. Just makes me think that she's a bad person. So, okay. So here's another argument. That this woman has. Let's hear that one.
The department's effort to implement automatic updates to the minimum salary threshold will create immense problems for the hoteliers, especially regarding financial projections and their ability to plan for the future. According to the proposed rule, the automatic updates will occur every 3 years, regardless of economic circumstances at the time, which means that the threshold will be updated even there is an economic problem exists.
Okay, so here, another lie, right? Here's another lie. The lie being that, if this updates every year, that's going to make my financial projections go crazy. Because it's a lie, because if you're actually doing all of this sophisticated financial projections and all of this kind of stuff for a 10-year, 15, 20-year plan, in every other line item on your budget, you must be, if you're a good business person, accounting for what? Inflation, right? You're accounting for inflation. You're making an estimate. It's not going to be perfect, but you're accounting for inflation. And so she's saying that if I have to account for inflation and keep the actual real value of this the same, that's going to make, I'm not going to be able to make financial projections. I mean, that's obviously a lie, right?
The 1% raise is a lot easier to calculate, so that's what they're going for.
It's so... How do people say this? Just in front of Congress, right?
In front of their employees.
In front of their employees on national TV.
Jeez.
Like, I'm just going to lie to people, and that's how I want to get my way. I'm going to lie. And so, look, here's a more diplomatic answer to her argument.
Well, actually, ma'am, if the overtime threshold is set at what seems like a static amount, it actually is a changing amount, because every year it erodes and it means less in terms of absolute dollars. So whether we index for inflation, which just keeps the status quo, or we set a number that erodes every year, it is a number that continues to change in effect and in reality every year. It's detrimental to workers. I mean, we saw that period from 1975 to 2004 when there was no change of a threshold. The Trump administration signaled that it planned to revisit the threshold every 3 years, acknowledging that that is a best practice. But of course, we haven't been able to revisit it that quickly again. The administrative process is, by definition, time-consuming, expensive. It's fabulous government practice to do something that is efficient, that keeps things steady for workers, and again, keeps things steady for employers. I've been doing this work for 30 plus years, and I've testified at a number of these hearings before. And what I always hear from my colleagues in the business community is they want to be able to plan. They want predictability, and they want bright line rules. Well, this rule gives them a bright line threshold and the predictability that every 3 years there will be modest increases that just keep pace with costs. And if we're in a recessionary period, in fact, there would probably be no increase, or there might be a decrease, in fact, in the threshold.
So there you go, right? Because no matter what you do, there's going to be a change. Either you're going to change the number and keep the value the same, or you're going to keep the number the same and the value is going to decrease every year. So those are your options. And obviously, the most fair thing to do is to continue to keep the value the same. And what another argument that she says, you know, the business lady is like, oh, you know, look, if there's an economic downturn, it'll be updated. Oh, isn't that so scary? You know, it could also decrease. The threshold could decrease if we're in an economic downturn and deflation happens and we get 20% deflation. Okay, obviously, the threshold would not increase.
They're
right?
literally just arguing for static wages against, and recession, inflation has, if y'all haven't noticed, take a look at your yearly raise as opposed to inflation to find out if you're actually getting a raise.
Yeah.
Because if you're buying, you know, you're getting a 2% raise and there's inflation at 10%, there's a lot of money that's going out the door. You're not going to be able to buy anything with.
So, look, we're knocking down these arguments one by one. We've got two more, and this one is kind of the funniest one that I have that they had during this hearing. So let's play that.
And one of the changes will be that the employees that they have for 10, 15 years who are on salary employees who feel like they are part of the business, they're part of the winning team working together, will have to be moved to salary. And that's in my opinion, demoralization for our employees. And I don't think as a business owner, I want to take that step. And I don't think my employees would be happy with that action either. So it's a lose-lose situation on the both sides when it comes to the employers and employee.
Yeah, I didn't even think of this question, but as you're talking this through, I'm thinking of my previous career, and most of my career I worked as an IT professional, and my salary probably would have fallen under this new rule, and I would have seen it as a demotion. I know that people may not understand that, but I would have seen it as a demotion because I enjoyed as a salary employee not having to clock in and clock out, right? Not having to have every minute of my day tracked. Because I think that at the end of the day, the employer and I had a relationship that you do the work, you get paid. Regardless of how much time that you're here. And so if you can...
Yeah, I like to just add one more thing. You know, we're not looking over the shoulders for most of our team members, and I call them team members when I'm with them instead of our employees, because they are part of the team. We're not looking at, okay, what time you're coming in, what time you're leaving. I'll give you a perfect example. This morning, when I was up, 6 in the morning, I received a text from one of my employees, and I have the text saying, hey, I need to leave 1 o'clock today. Is it okay? Because she's changing her apartment from one apartment to another location, and they have people helping today. Now, this was not something that was expected. It was a last-minute thing. So the stuff like this happens, and I want to say not like once in a while. I would say weekly basis. If somebody's has to go to doctors or so they have to pick up their child. There's so many examples that I can give you that us as a business owners, but because our relationship with our employees is so close that they also know that Jagrati is never going to say no, because she knows that how important the family and your medical situations are. So I think a lot of this relationship would change, and I think that would be a devastating, especially for me as a business owner, to see my employees in that position, and to see my business in that position as well.
Yeah, so here's something that may make her feel better. You can still allow your hourly employees to take the day off if they have to go to the hospital. Not illegal under this rule.
Wowzers.
Yeah, not illegal under this rule. And just, what a silly thing to say that,
you're not going to let them go to the hospital or something? Like, what's going to change, lady?
Well, but also,
Come on, lady.
Like, it's like,
Don't be mean.
I would consider it
Who's
demotion.
this?
I would consider it a demotion if I got more money. I mean, just it's difficult to even have a response to that because it's so silly on its face. Like, I would feel
that sucks.
hurt
If they demoted me and paid me more, I'd be so pissed. I'd be like, wait, you're taking responsibilities and giving me money? Does that happen?
Don't throw me in the briar patch, Brer Fox. I would hate to go in the briar patch. That's my least favorite thing. More lies. Okay, well, so here's the last thing that no, that's not even, we won't even do that because it was kind of along those lines, and it's not even
You had enough.
interesting.
You had enough.
I'm done. We're over time, and yeah, so there we go. So went through the arguments, not very convincing. Workers deserve overtime. That is still my stance after reviewing the hearing.
All this to fight against people already working 40+ hours. They're already putting in the sweat.
Crazy.
Already putting it in.
Absolutely crazy. All right. Well, folks, appreciate your time. tvlr.fm/contact to get our newsletters in your inbox every single week. tvlr.fm/contact, 844-899-8857. If you would like to leave us a voicemail or send us a text message, you can do that there, 844-899-TVLR.
14 or 15 shirts left, is that what you said?
Yeah, 14 or 15 shirts left, tvlr.fm/store. Okay. See you next week, folks.
See you then, yo.